Success often exposes your weaknesses, faster than failure ever did. Most people believe failure is what reveals a person's flaws. They think struggle exposes weakness, insecurity, and emotional instability. But the truth is far more unsettling. Success often uncovers the darkest parts of a person much faster than failure ever could. Failure humbles you publicly, but success quietly tests everything you thought you had under control. When people begin succeeding, hidden insecurities suddenly become amplified. The fear of losing status replaces the fear of never having it. Small criticism starts feeling like a personal attack. Trust becomes difficult because success attracts attention, envy, fake admiration, and hidden competition. The same validation that once felt exciting slowly becomes addictive. Many people become emotionally trapped by the image they worked so hard to create. Success also exposes habits that failure can hide. Laziness becomes dangerous when responsibility grows. Ego becomes destructive when praise increases. Emotional weakness becomes visible when pressure multiplies. A person who once blamed circumstances suddenly has nowhere left to hide because achievement removes excuses and places full responsibility directly on them. One of the creepiest parts is that success changes how people behave around you. Some become unusually supportive. Others become distant, cold, or strangely competitive. People who once ignored you may suddenly seek access to your time, energy, or connections. This forces you to confront a painful reality. Many relationships were built around who you used to be, not who you are becoming. The higher someone rises, the harder it becomes to tell who genuinely cares and who is simply reacting to the benefits attached to success. Most people do not fear your failure. They fear your improvement. One of the harshest psychological truths about human nature is that most people are not disturbed when you fail. Failure feels safe to them. It keeps the balance of comparison intact. What truly unsettles people is watching you improve beyond the version of yourself they became comfortable with. Your growth silently forces others to confront their own stagnation, and many people would rather protect their comfort than witness your transformation. When you begin changing, the reactions around you become strangely different. Some people who once encouraged you suddenly become distant. Others start joking about your discipline, your goals, or your new habits in subtle ways that sound harmless on the surface. But underneath the humor is discomfort. Your improvement becomes a reminder of what they have avoided doing themselves. The unsettling part is that people often prefer the familiar version of you, even if that version was unhappy, insecure, or struggling. They know how to relate to that version. They know how to feel equal around that version. But growth changes social dynamics, confidence changes conversations, discipline changes priorities, ambition changes energy, and not everyone emotionally benefits from those changes. As you improve, you also begin noticing hidden resistance that was always there. Some people stop celebrating your wins. Some become colder after your success. Others suddenly compete with you after years of showing no interest in progress themselves. Improvement exposes insecurities in people who secretly relied on you remaining small. The creepiest part is that many people will support your dreams only as long as those dreams never become real enough to change the relationship between you and them. Discipline feels boring before it starts. Looking powerful. One of the strangest realities about discipline is that it rarely feels exciting while it is building your future. In the beginning, discipline looks painfully ordinary. Waking up early, repeating routines, saying no to distractions, practicing the same skill every day, eating carefully, staying consistent when nobody notices. It all feels repetitive and emotionally unrewarding. Most people quit not because discipline is impossible, but because it feels too boring to believe it is changing anything. The human brain craves stimulation, novelty, and instant emotional reward. Discipline gives almost none of those things at first. There are no dramatic movie moments, no sudden transformation, no applause, just quiet repetition that makes you question whether your effort even matters. This is why so many people become addicted to motivation instead. Motivation feels emotional and intense. Discipline feels silent and mechanical. What makes this psychological trap so dangerous is that the early stages of discipline often look identical to failure from the outside. Nobody sees the mental strength forming underneath the routine. Nobody notices the emotional control slowly developing. Even worse, disciplined people sometimes begin doubting themselves because the rewards arrive much slower than the sacrifices. Then something unsettling happens over time. The same habits that once looked boring start producing visible results. Confidence becomes calmer. Decisions become sharper. Stress becomes easier to control. While others rely on mood, disciplined people keep moving automatically. That consistency starts looking almost unnatural to people who live emotionally. The creepiest part is that discipline slowly changes your identity without you realizing it. One day you notice that the habits you once forced yourself to do now feel normal, while the behaviors that once controlled you suddenly feel weak, childish, and impossible to return to. Your talent may open the door, but your emotional control keeps you inside the room. One of the most uncomfortable truths about success is that talent alone is rarely enough to survive at higher levels. Talent attracts attention quickly, but emotional control determines whether someone can actually handle pressure, criticism, jealousy, responsibility, and expectations once the spotlight arrives. Many gifted people lose opportunities not because they lacked skill, but because they could not control themselves when situations became emotionally difficult. At first, talent feels powerful because it creates fast validation. People praise you, notice you, and expect greatness from you. But the moment pressure increases, emotional weaknesses begin revealing themselves. Ego reacts to criticism. Insecurity reacts to competition. Anger reacts to rejection. Fear reacts to failure. Suddenly, intelligence and ability become useless because emotions quietly start controlling behavior from behind the scenes. The disturbing part is that emotional instability destroys opportunities slowly and invisibly. One emotional outburst can damage trust. One impulsive decision can ruin years of progress. One inability to handle stress can make people stop relying on you, no matter how talented you are. At high levels, people are not only observing your skill, they are observing your reactions, your patience, your consistency, and how dangerous you become under pressure. This is why emotionally disciplined people often outperform naturally gifted people over time. Calmness creates stability. Stability creates trust. Trust creates long-term opportunities. Meanwhile, uncontrolled emotions quietly sabotage even brilliant individuals without them realizing it. The creepiest part is that emotional weakness often hides itself behind intelligence. Some people become so focused on improving talent that they completely ignore the emotional flaws secretly controlling their decisions. Eventually, success places them in environments where skill gets them noticed, but emotional instability slowly pushes them back out of the room they worked so hard to enter. The people who support your dreams may still not understand your sacrifices. One of the loneliest parts of chasing success is realizing that support and understanding are not always the same thing. Many people around you may genuinely want you to succeed. They may encourage you, congratulate your progress, and say they believe in your dreams. but very few truly understand the psychological cost, emotional exhaustion, and private sacrifices required to become something greater than your current reality. From the outside, ambition often looks exciting. People see the goals, the possibilities, and eventually the results. What they rarely see are the invisible losses attached to growth. They do not feel the nights you stayed awake worrying about your future. They do not feel the pressure of constantly thinking ahead while others relax comfortably. They do not feel the guilt that comes from saying no to distractions, relationships, or opportunities that no longer align with your direction. The unsettling part is that even supportive people may unintentionally make you feel isolated. They may wonder why you work so much, why you seem distant, or why your priorities have changed. Some may support your dream emotionally, while quietly struggling to understand why you are sacrificing comfort, free time, stability, or social connection to pursue it. As success slowly changes you, your inner world becomes harder to explain. Your fears become different. Your standards become different. Your mind becomes occupied by responsibilities and goals that many people around you cannot emotionally relate to. This creates a strange loneliness where you feel loved yet still misunderstood. The creepiest part is realizing that some sacrifices are invisible even to the people closest to you. They may celebrate the results one day without ever fully understanding the emotional weight you carried privately just to survive the process of becoming that person. Nobody claps for consistency until the results become impossible to ignore. One of the harshest psychological realities about success is that consistency is almost invisible in the beginning. People admire outcomes, but they rarely respect the repetitive process that creates those outcomes. Waking up every day to do the same difficult things feels unnoticed, unrewarded, and emotionally draining because the world usually ignores slow progress until it suddenly becomes dramatic enough to capture attention. At first, consistency looks unimpressive, repeating routines, improving quietly, practicing daily, saving money slowly, working on skills for months without visible success. It all appears ordinary from the outside. Most people do not celebrate discipline while it is still small. In fact, they often question it. They ask why you are working so hard when there is no immediate proof that it is paying off. The disturbing part is that consistency requires emotional endurance without external validation. You continue showing up while people overlook you. You keep building while others entertain themselves. You stay committed while results remain hidden underground, like roots growing beneath the surface. This silent phase psychologically breaks many people because humans naturally crave recognition as proof that their effort matters. Then something strange happens over time. The small, invisible actions begin stacking together. Skills sharpen, confidence deepens, opportunities increase. Suddenly, the same people who ignored your routines start calling you talented, lucky, or gifted. They only notice the visible result, never the thousands of quiet moments that created it. What makes this even creepier is how quickly public perception changes once results become undeniable. People who doubted your process suddenly act as if they believed in you all along. Some even begin copying the habits they once mocked. The frightening truth is that most people are not incapable of success. They simply cannot survive the long period where consistency feels emotionally invisible before it finally becomes powerful enough for the world to notice. Success can make you lonelier because your standards start removing people. One of the darkest realities about personal growth is that success does not only change your lifestyle, it changes your tolerance. As your standards rise, certain conversations begin feeling empty, certain habits start feeling destructive, and certain relationships slowly stop feeling aligned with who you are becoming. What makes this painful is that the distance often happens naturally, without arguments or dramatic endings. At first, loneliness does not arrive all at once. It begins subtly. You stop enjoying the same distractions. You become more protective of your time. Your goals demand routines and sacrifices that many people around you do not understand. Suddenly, the things that once kept relationships alive, constant availability, gossip, complaining, aimless spending of time, start feeling emotionally exhausting instead of comforting. The unsettling part is that improvement changes social balance. Some people feel inspired by your discipline, but others quietly feel judged by it, even when you say nothing. Your consistency becomes a reminder of what they keep postponing in their own lives. Over time, this creates invisible tension. Friends may become distant. Family members may misunderstand your focus. People who once felt comfortable around you may start acting strangely defensive or competitive. Success also teaches you a disturbing truth about connection. Not everyone loves you for who you are. Some people love the version of you that required less boundaries, less ambition, and less self-respect. The moment you stop tolerating chaos, disrespect, or mediocrity, certain relationships begin falling apart on their own. The creepiest part is realizing that growth sometimes forces you to choose between belonging and becoming who you were meant to be. And many people secretly stay stuck in life because they are terrified of the loneliness that comes with outgrowing environments that once made them feel accepted. Your comfort zone will always explain why staying the same is reasonable. One of the creepiest things about the human mind is that your comfort zone rarely feels dangerous while you are inside it. It feels logical, safe, familiar, reasonable. That is what makes it so powerful. The comfort zone does not scream at you to stay the same. It quietly explains why changing can wait until tomorrow. It creates believable excuses that sound intelligent enough to protect you from discomfort without making you realize you are slowly becoming trapped. The mind is designed to avoid uncertainty because uncertainty feels threatening to survival. This is why people often stay in situations that quietly destroy their growth simply because those situations are predictable. A painful routine can feel safer than an unfamiliar opportunity. Even unhappiness becomes emotionally comfortable when repeated long enough. What makes this psychological pattern disturbing is how convincing the internal voice becomes. The comfort zone always sounds rational. It says things like, "Now is not the right time. You should prepare more first," or "You might fail and embarrass yourself." These thoughts rarely feel like fear. They feel like wisdom. That is why so many people mistake self-protection for intelligence while years quietly disappear. Over time, the comfort zone reshapes identity itself. People stop seeing themselves as capable of change because repetition convinces the brain that the current version of life is permanent. Dreams slowly become fantasies instead of goals. Risk starts feeling irresponsible. Growth starts feeling unnatural. The creepiest part is that comfort zones often become invisible. Many people genuinely believe they are thinking freely, while their entire life is secretly being controlled by routines, fears, and emotional patterns designed only to keep them psychologically safe from discomfort, uncertainty, and temporary failure. Many people want success, but only a few want the personality required to handle it. Most people are attracted to the rewards of success, but far fewer are willing to develop the personality traits necessary to survive what success actually brings. Everyone imagines the money, freedom, attention, respect, and opportunities. Very few imagine the emotional pressure, criticism, isolation, responsibility, and constant self-control attached to those things. Success changes your environment, but it also demands a complete psychological transformation from the person trying to reach it. The uncomfortable truth is that success often requires becoming emotionally different from the average person. You must learn to tolerate uncertainty without panicking. You must stay focused without constant validation. You must handle criticism without collapsing emotionally. You must control your ego when praised and control your fear when doubted. Most people want the rewards while still keeping the same emotional habits that destroy progress. This creates a hidden psychological conflict. People say they want success, but subconsciously resist the personality changes required to maintain it. They want discipline without discomfort, confidence without rejection, leadership without pressure, wealth without responsibility, attention without criticism. But success forces a person to confront emotional weaknesses they spent years avoiding. The disturbing part is that success magnifies personality flaws instead of hiding them. Insecurity becomes more dangerous with influence. Ego becomes more destructive with power. Emotional instability becomes more visible under pressure. The higher someone rises, the more emotionally exposed they become. Over time, successful people often develop colder boundaries, stronger emotional control, and a higher tolerance for discomfort simply because survival demands it. This is why many people secretly quit before reaching higher levels. They realize the process is not only changing their lifestyle, it is changing who they are psychologically. The creepiest part is that some people are not afraid of hard work. They are afraid of becoming the kind of person their dream actually requires. You will lose interest many times before you lose ability. One of the most dangerous psychological traps in success is believing that lost excitement means lost potential. Many people assume that when motivation disappears, it must mean they are no longer meant for the goal. But the truth is far more unsettling. Long before people lose their ability to succeed, they usually lose emotional excitement first. Interest fades temporarily, routines become repetitive, and the mind starts searching for easier stimulation. The human brain constantly chases novelty. It craves emotional reward, variety, and quick results. This is why the early stages of a dream often feel intoxicating. Everything feels meaningful because the idea is new. But once repetition arrives, the emotional high begins fading. The work becomes ordinary. Improvement slows down. Results stop feeling immediate. Suddenly, the same dream that once felt exciting starts feeling emotionally heavy. What makes this so dangerous is that many people mistake temporary boredom for permanent failure. They abandon skills they were actually becoming good at simply because the emotional excitement disappeared. They think passion should always feel intense, not realizing that mastery often feels calm, repetitive, and emotionally neutral for long periods of time. The creepiest part is that your ability can continue growing even while your feelings lose interest. Your discipline may still be building skill beneath the surface, while your emotions quietly tell you to quit. This internal conflict confuses many people because they expect progress to always feel rewarding. Over time, successful people learn something emotionally uncomfortable. Feelings cannot always be trusted. Some days you feel powerful while making no progress. Other days you feel disconnected while secretly improving more than ever before. The frightening reality is that countless people walk away from their future not because they lacked talent, intelligence, or opportunity, but because they believed every important journey was supposed to keep feeling emotionally exciting forever. The work that changes your life is usually the work nobody sees. One of the most deceptive things about success is that people only notice the visible rewards while remaining completely blind to the invisible sacrifices that created them. Humans are naturally drawn to outcomes. They admire confidence, money, influence, skill, and achievement, but rarely pay attention to the silent routines, lonely nights, repeated failures, and emotionally exhausting discipline hidden underneath those results. The work that truly transforms a person almost always happens in private. At first, invisible work feels psychologically painful because the human mind craves recognition. People want proof that their effort matters. They want applause, validation, encouragement, and visible progress. But real growth often happens quietly for long periods of time without external rewards. Hours of learning, practicing, planning, failing, and improving can pass without anyone noticing any difference at all. This creates one of the hardest emotional battles in personal growth, continuing without immediate validation. Most people lose motivation when effort becomes invisible. They mistake silence for failure. They assume nothing is changing because nobody is reacting yet. What they fail to realize is that invisible repetition slowly rewires identity long before visible success appears. The unsettling part is that private habits eventually become public realities. The person who seems naturally confident practiced alone for years. The person who appears successful built routines nobody respected at the beginning. The calm person learned emotional control through countless silent battles nobody witnessed. The creepiest part is that people often envy outcomes while secretly refusing the invisible lifestyle required to create them. They admire the finished version of someone while overlooking the isolation, boredom, sacrifice, and emotional pressure hidden behind it. Most transformations happen quietly, far away from attention, while the world assumes success appeared suddenly, overnight. Being gifted can make you lazy if you keep depending on potential. One of the darkest traps of natural talent is that it can quietly destroy the hunger to develop discipline. When something comes easily to you, the brain begins associating success with ability instead of effort. This creates a dangerous psychological illusion where potential feels more valuable than consistency. Gifted people often receive praise so early in life that they become emotionally attached to being seen as talented rather than becoming truly skilled. At first, natural ability feels like an advantage. You learn faster, adapt quicker, and outperform others with less effort. Teachers praise you, friends admire you, people call you special, but hidden underneath that validation is a growing dependence on ease. The moment real struggle appears, many gifted people become emotionally uncomfortable because difficulty feels unfamiliar to their identity. What makes this pattern disturbing is that talent can create avoidance. Instead of practicing harder, gifted people sometimes avoid situations where they might fail because failure threatens the image of being naturally good at something. They become addicted to protecting potential instead of testing limits. Over time, they stop growing while less talented but more disciplined people quietly surpass them. The human mind loves shortcuts, and natural ability becomes one of the most dangerous shortcuts of all. Why build strong habits when talent keeps saving you? Why develop patience when intelligence produces fast results? Slowly, discipline weakens because potential creates the illusion that success will always remain available later. The creepiest part is that many gifted people never realize this is happening until life becomes competitive. Suddenly, raw ability is no longer enough. The people who once struggled are now stronger, more focused, emotionally tougher, and more consistent. Potential that was never trained begins collapsing under pressure because talent opened the door early, but discipline was never developed strongly enough to survive inside it. Your excuses may sound valid and still keep you broke. One of the most dangerous psychological traps in life is that excuses do not need to be false to destroy your future. Many excuses are completely understandable. Stress, fear, lack of support, exhaustion, bad timing, financial problems, rejection, family pressure, anxiety, and past failures are all real struggles. The disturbing part is that reality does not always care whether your excuses are emotionally valid. If they repeatedly stop action, they still slowly trap you in the same place year after year. The human mind is incredibly skilled at protecting itself from discomfort. Instead of admitting fear, people often create logical explanations for avoiding difficult action. The excuse feels intelligent, responsible, and emotionally justified, which makes it even more dangerous. A person can spend years convincing themselves they are waiting for the right time, while secretly avoiding uncertainty, rejection, or the possibility of failure. What makes excuses psychologically addictive is that they temporarily reduce emotional pressure. The moment someone explains why they cannot act, their anxiety decreases for a while, but over time, this creates a hidden pattern where comfort becomes more important than progress. The brain slowly learns to seek relief instead of solutions. The creepiest part is that excuses often sound extremely reasonable to other people too. Friends may agree with them, family may understand them, society may even encourage them. This creates an illusion that staying stuck is acceptable because the explanation makes sense emotionally. Meanwhile, years quietly disappear in the background. Over time, excuses reshape identity itself. People stop seeing themselves as capable and begin seeing themselves as victims of circumstance. Eventually, they become emotionally attached to the very stories that are preventing their growth, because those stories protect them from confronting painful truths about fear, discipline, and responsibility. Most people are not unlucky. They are untrained. One of the harshest realities about success is that many people blame bad luck for problems that are actually caused by lack of preparation, lack of discipline, or lack of emotional control. Calling yourself unlucky feels emotionally safer because it removes responsibility. It creates the comforting illusion that life is simply unfair, rather than forcing you to confront the painful possibility that you may be untrained for the level you want to reach. Most people never train their focus, so distractions control them. They never train emotional resilience, so criticism destroys their confidence. They never train communication, patience, consistency, or decision-making, yet they still expect extraordinary outcomes. Then, when opportunities disappear or mistakes repeat themselves, they call it bad luck instead of recognizing patterns they never developed the discipline to fix. The disturbing part is that untrained behavior often feels normal because people become surrounded by others with the same weak habits. Procrastination starts looking ordinary. Emotional impulsiveness becomes personality. Lack of focus becomes stress. Slowly, people normalize behaviors that quietly sabotage their future while convincing themselves external circumstances are entirely responsible. This is why two people can face the same opportunity and experience completely different outcomes. One person remains calm under pressure, adapts quickly, learns fast, and responds intelligently. The other panics emotionally, avoids discomfort, and collapses mentally the moment things become difficult. From the outside, it looks like luck. Underneath, it is preparation versus unpreparedness. The creepiest part is that many people never realize how much control they actually had over their improvement. Years pass while they wait for life to change, never understanding that successful people often look lucky simply because they spent years training skills, habits, and emotional strength nobody else was willing to practice consistently. You can waste years preparing and still avoid actually starting. One of the most dangerous psychological traps is that preparation can feel so productive that people mistake it for real progress. Researching, planning, organizing, learning, watching tutorials, taking notes, waiting for the perfect moment. All of it creates the comforting illusion of movement while quietly protecting a person from the fear of actually beginning. Many people spend years preparing for a life they never truly start. The human mind fears exposure more than difficulty. Starting something real creates uncertainty, vulnerability, and the possibility of failure becoming visible to others. Preparation feels safer because it keeps the dream emotionally alive without forcing confrontation with reality. As long as someone is getting ready, they never have to face the terrifying question of whether they can actually succeed. What makes this trap so unsettling is how intelligent it sounds internally. People convince themselves they simply need more time, more knowledge, more confidence, better timing, more equipment, more money, or a clearer plan. But underneath those excuses is often hidden fear disguised as responsibility. Preparation becomes emotional protection. Over time, this creates a strange form of invisible regret. A person slowly realizes they have mastered studying success instead of participating in it. They know theories, strategies, and motivational ideas, yet their real life remains unchanged because knowledge without action slowly turns into frustration. The creepiest part is that excessive preparation can become addictive. It gives small emotional rewards without requiring real risk. Watching others succeed feels safer than exposing your own attempts to judgment or failure. Eventually, some people become experts at imagining a future they secretly avoid creating. Years pass quietly, and the life they kept preparing for slowly becomes the life they never lived at all. Success punishes emotional decisions. One of the harshest realities about success is that emotions become far more dangerous as your opportunities grow. At lower levels, emotional decisions may only create temporary mistakes, but as success increases, impulsive reactions begin carrying heavier consequences. One angry message, one emotional purchase, one desperate decision, or one moment of insecurity can damage relationships, finances, reputation, and years of progress almost instantly. The frightening part is that emotional thinking rarely feels irrational in the moment. Anger feels justified, fear feels protective, excitement feels like certainty, pride feels like confidence. The brain is extremely skilled at making emotional reactions appear logical while they are happening. This is why intelligent people still sabotage themselves. Knowledge does not protect someone whose emotions are temporarily controlling their behavior. Success environments amplify pressure in disturbing ways. More money creates bigger temptations. More attention creates more ego traps. More competition creates more insecurity. Suddenly, emotional control becomes more valuable than raw intelligence because opportunities are no longer destroyed by lack of skill alone. They are destroyed by impatience, arrogance, panic, and emotional instability. Many people lose success, not during failure, but during emotional highs. Excitement makes them reckless. Validation makes them arrogant. Attention makes them careless. They begin believing feelings are accurate indicators of reality, and slowly their decisions become reactive instead of strategic. The creepiest part is that emotions often disguise themselves as instincts. A person may think they are following their gut when they are actually reacting from fear, ego, loneliness, or unresolved insecurity. Over time, repeated emotional decisions quietly create chaos while the person keeps blaming circumstances instead of recognizing the invisible pattern controlling their life from underneath. The price of becoming better is outgrowing your old identity. One of the most painful realities about personal growth is that becoming better does not simply add new things to your life. It forces parts of your old identity to die. The habits, beliefs, routines, coping mechanisms, and even relationships that once felt normal slowly begin feeling incompatible with the person you are trying to become. Growth sounds inspiring in theory, but psychologically, it often feels like losing pieces of yourself in silence. Most people underestimate how emotionally attached they are to their old identity. Even unhealthy patterns can feel comforting because they are familiar. The mind prefers predictability, even when that predictability creates suffering. This is why people often sabotage their own progress. Improvement creates internal conflict because the brain feels threatened when old behaviors are no longer allowed to survive. As someone changes, even simple things begin feeling different. Conversations that once felt enjoyable become draining. Certain friendships feel smaller. Old habits lose their emotional excitement. The person starts experiencing a strange loneliness because they no longer fully relate to who they used to be, but have not yet fully become who they are growing into. The unsettling part is that people around you often react to this transformation emotionally. Some may accuse you of changing too much. Others may become uncomfortable because your growth quietly exposes their lack of movement. The version of you they understood is disappearing, and not everyone is prepared to emotionally adjust to that reality. Over time, growth begins reshaping your personality from the inside out. Your standards rise, your tolerance for distractions decreases, your priorities shift. What once felt normal starts feeling destructive. The creepiest part is realizing that becoming a better version of yourself sometimes requires grieving the old version, because parts of your previous identity can never come with you into the next stage of your life. Nobody is coming to force you to become serious. One of the most uncomfortable truths about life is that nobody is coming to rescue you from your own wasted potential. As children, people are constantly pushed by parents, teachers, deadlines, rules, and consequences. Someone always watches, corrects, warns, or pressures them to stay responsible. But adulthood becomes psychologically terrifying because eventually that external pressure disappears, and many people never develop the internal discipline to replace it. This creates a dangerous illusion where people believe there will someday be a magical moment that finally forces them to change. They wait for motivation, the perfect opportunity, financial pressure, heartbreak, humiliation, or some dramatic wake-up call that suddenly transforms them into a focused person. But for many people, that moment never arrives. Life quietly continues while procrastination slowly becomes identity. The disturbing part is how easy it is to stay unserious without immediate punishment. Years can disappear through distractions, entertainment, excuses, comfort, and endless planning. The consequences often arrive slowly rather than instantly, which makes weak habits feel harmless in the moment. A wasted evening feels small. A wasted month feels manageable. But eventually, people wake up emotionally shocked by how much time disappeared while they kept telling themselves they would become serious later. What makes this even creepier is that the mind becomes skilled at protecting comfort. It creates rational explanations for delay. It convinces people they are still figuring things out while secretly avoiding difficult action. Over time, avoidance stops feeling temporary and starts becoming permanent behavior. The frightening reality is that some people spend their entire lives waiting for external pressure to force maturity onto them, never realizing that discipline becomes truly powerful only when a person voluntarily chooses responsibility before circumstances become painful enough to demand it. You do not need more time. You need fewer distractions. One of the harshest truths about modern life is that most people are not losing their dreams because they lack time. They are losing them because their attention is constantly being stolen. Distractions have become so normal that people no longer realize how deeply fragmented their minds have become. Every notification, endless scroll, random video, unnecessary conversation, and moment of mindless stimulation quietly drains the focus required to build something meaningful. The frightening part is that distractions rarely feel dangerous in the moment. They feel harmless. 5 minutes becomes 30. One distraction becomes an entire evening. Days disappear into tiny interruptions that seem insignificant individually, but become devastating when repeated over months and years. Most people never notice how much of their life is being consumed because distraction feels comfortable while destruction happens slowly. Human attention was never designed for constant stimulation. The brain becomes addicted to novelty, making deep focus feel uncomfortable and emotionally unnatural. Silence starts feeling boring. Stillness becomes difficult. Concentration feels exhausting. Over time, many people lose the ability to sit with difficult work long enough to create anything powerful. What makes this even creepier is that distractions often disguise themselves as productivity. Constantly checking messages, consuming information, watching motivational content, or planning endlessly can create the illusion of movement without producing real results. A person feels mentally busy while their actual life quietly remains unchanged. Eventually, distractions begin reshaping identity itself. The mind becomes weaker at resisting impulses. Patience decreases. Discipline collapses. Important goals start feeling emotionally heavy because the brain has been trained to seek instant stimulation instead of long-term reward. The most disturbing part is realizing that many people are not failing because life stopped them. They are failing because distractions slowly consumed the focus their future required. The dream will keep feeling impossible until your habits become stronger than your mood. One of the most dangerous illusions people believe is that they need to feel motivated before they can make progress. They wait for the perfect emotional state, the perfect burst of inspiration, or the perfect moment to finally become consistent. But moods are unstable by nature. They change constantly based on stress, sleep, fear, insecurity, environment, and even small disappointments. A life controlled by mood becomes unpredictable, and unpredictable effort almost never creates extraordinary results. At first, dreams feel impossibly far away because emotions keep interrupting progress. Some days you feel powerful and productive. Other days you feel tired, distracted, doubtful, or emotionally drained. When motivation disappears, action disappears with it. Slowly, people begin confusing emotional inconsistency with a lack of potential, when the real problem is that their habits are still weaker than their temporary feelings. The human brain naturally seeks comfort and avoids discomfort. This means your mood will often encourage short-term relief instead of long-term growth. It will convince you to delay important work, avoid difficult tasks, and choose distractions that feel emotionally easier in the moment. The disturbing part is that these small emotional decisions rarely feel destructive while they are happening. They simply feel harmless, reasonable, and temporary. Then something psychologically powerful happens when habits become stronger than mood. Action starts occurring automatically, even during low motivation. Discipline begins replacing emotional negotiation. Progress becomes stable because your behavior no longer depends on how you feel that day. The creepiest part is that most successful people are not constantly motivated like others imagine. Many simply trained themselves to continue moving while emotionally tired, doubtful, bored, stressed, or uninspired. Their habits became stronger than the emotional voice constantly asking them to stop. Some friends only like you when your struggle makes them comfortable. One of the darkest truths about human relationships is that not everyone around you is emotionally prepared to see you rise. Some people feel safest when you are struggling beside them because your pain protects the balance of comparison between you. As long as you remain confused, insecure, unsuccessful, or emotionally dependent, the relationship feels comfortable to them. But the moment you begin improving, their energy quietly changes in ways that are difficult to explain at first. This psychological shift often happens subtly. A friend who once encouraged you becomes strangely dismissive about your goals. Your discipline becomes too serious, Your ambition becomes unrealistic. Your confidence becomes different. The support they gave you during struggle suddenly weakens once your progress becomes visible. Deep down, your growth begins threatening the version of the relationship that made them feel emotionally secure. The unsettling part is that many people do not consciously realize they are doing this. Human beings naturally compare themselves to those around them. When someone close begins evolving, it forces others to confront uncomfortable emotions about their own life, wasted time, lack of discipline, or fear of change. Instead of dealing with those emotions honestly, some people unconsciously try to pull the growing person back toward familiarity. As your life improves, hidden jealousy can start disguising itself as jokes, criticism, fake concern, or emotional distance. Some friends may stop celebrating your wins. Others become strangely competitive after years of showing no ambition themselves. A few may even secretly enjoy seeing you fail because your struggle restores emotional comfort for them. The creepiest part is realizing that certain people were never attached to your happiness. They were attached to the version of you that made them feel safe, equal, needed, or emotionally superior without ever having to grow themselves. Success requires you to disappoint people who benefited from your availability. One of the darkest realities about personal growth is that success often forces you to become less emotionally accessible to people who became comfortable with unlimited access to your time, energy, attention, and availability. The moment you become serious about your goals, priorities begin changing, and that change quietly threatens relationships built around convenience rather than mutual growth. At first, the shift feels subtle. You stop answering messages instantly. You protect your schedule more carefully. You spend less time entertaining distractions, gossip, unnecessary outings, or emotionally draining conversations. What once felt normal suddenly starts feeling expensive because every hour now has a visible cost attached to it. This is usually when people begin reacting differently toward you. The disturbing part is that not everyone misses you because they genuinely value you. Some people miss the comfort of your constant availability. They miss easy access to your attention, emotional support, favors, or validation. When you start creating boundaries, they may accuse you of changing, becoming selfish, arrogant, distant, or too focused on yourself. In reality, your priorities are simply no longer centered around keeping everyone comfortable. This creates a painful psychological conflict because humans naturally fear disappointing others. Many people secretly sabotage their own growth just to avoid guilt, tension, or rejection. They continue overextending themselves emotionally because being needed feels safer than risking disapproval. What makes this even creepier is that some relationships only function when you remain accessible and emotionally predictable. The moment you begin protecting your peace, your time, or your ambition, hidden resentment appears. People who once praised your kindness may suddenly resent the boundaries that now limit their access to you. The frightening truth is that success often demands emotional separation from environments where your constant availability benefited others more than it benefited your future. Your biggest enemy may be the version of you that loves easy rewards. One of the most disturbing truths about human behavior is that people often destroy their own future for temporary comfort without even realizing it. The mind naturally craves easy rewards because they provide immediate emotional satisfaction with little effort. Scrolling endlessly, procrastinating, overeating, avoiding discomfort, chasing validation, wasting time, and choosing entertainment over growth all feel harmless in the moment. But over time, these small pleasures quietly train a person to avoid the very struggle required to change their life. The dangerous part is that easy rewards do not feel destructive at first. They feel relaxing, deserved, and comforting. The brain releases pleasure instantly, creating a cycle where short-term satisfaction slowly becomes stronger than long-term ambition. This is why people often know exactly what they should do, but still fail to do it consistently. Their rational mind wants growth, but another version of them secretly wants comfort more. What makes this psychological battle so unsettling is that the enemy does not look dangerous. It looks familiar. It sounds reasonable. It says things like, "I'll start tomorrow," "I deserve a break," or "one more hour won't matter." Slowly, these tiny decisions begin shaping identity. Discipline weakens. Attention span shrinks. Hard work starts feeling emotionally painful because the brain has adapted to instant stimulation instead of delayed reward. The creepiest part is that easy rewards can make a person feel busy while keeping them completely stagnant. Someone can spend years consuming motivation, entertainment, and distractions while convincing themselves they are still moving forward. Eventually, they realize the comfortable habits they protected so carefully were quietly stealing the future they once imagined for themselves. You can be busy every day and still be moving in the wrong direction. One of the most unsettling truths about productivity is that being busy does not always mean you are making progress. In fact, constant activity can become one of the most effective ways people avoid confronting whether their life is actually improving. The human mind often confuses movement with advancement because staying occupied creates the emotional illusion of importance, control, and purpose. This is why many people spend years exhausting themselves while remaining emotionally frustrated and stuck in the same place. They answer messages, attend meetings, scroll endlessly for research, multitask constantly, and fill every hour with activity. But underneath all that movement is a disturbing reality. None of those actions are truly pushing them toward the future they claim to want. The dangerous part is that busyness feels productive enough to silence guilt temporarily. A person tells themselves they are trying hard because they feel mentally drained at the end of the day. But exhaustion is not always proof of meaningful progress. Sometimes it is proof of distraction, poor direction, or fear of focusing on the few difficult actions that would actually change their life. The brain secretly prefers shallow tasks because they provide quick emotional rewards without the discomfort of deep focus or risk. Small tasks create dopamine. Real growth creates uncertainty. This is why people often stay trapped in cycles of low-value activity while avoiding the uncomfortable work that truly matters. The creepiest part is that someone can remain busy for so long that their identity becomes attached to chaos itself. Slowing down to think clearly starts feeling uncomfortable because silence forces them to confront whether all their effort is actually leading anywhere meaningful or simply helping them avoid the terrifying possibility that they have been running in the wrong direction for years. Motivation is too weak to build anything permanent. One of the biggest psychological illusions people believe is that motivation is the key to success. Motivation feels powerful because it creates emotional intensity. It gives temporary confidence, excitement, and the feeling that change is finally about to happen. But motivation is deeply unreliable because it depends on emotion, and emotions constantly change. The same mind that feels unstoppable at night can feel exhausted, doubtful, and distracted the next morning. This is why so many people repeatedly start improving their lives but struggle to continue. Motivation creates strong beginnings but weak endurance. It pushes people to act when they feel inspired, yet disappears the moment. Discomfort, boredom, stress, or uncertainty enters the process. The human brain naturally avoids pain and seeks immediate pleasure, which means motivation often collapses the second progress stops feeling emotionally rewarding. The disturbing part is that motivation can become addictive. Some people spend years consuming inspiration instead of building systems. They watch videos, read quotes, make plans, and feel emotionally energized for a few hours, but their real behavior never changes consistently enough to create permanent results. The excitement itself becomes a substitute for action. Permanent success is usually built through repetition that feels emotionally boring. Discipline forces action even when mood disappears. Habits continue working when excitement dies. Systems protect progress during emotional lows. Meanwhile, motivation only visits occasionally, often disappearing exactly when it is needed most. Over time, emotionally driven people become trapped in cycles of starting and stopping. They confuse emotional intensity with real commitment. Each failed restart slowly weakens their confidence because they begin doubting their ability to follow through on anything long-term. The creepiest part is that motivation often feels strongest before difficult action begins. Once the hard reality of consistency appears, the emotion fades, leaving people alone with the truth that success was never built by feelings alone. Most opportunities do not look attractive when they first appear. One of the strangest psychological truths about success is that life-changing opportunities rarely arrive looking impressive. Most people imagine opportunity as something obvious, exciting, and immediately rewarding. They expect clear signs, instant confidence, and visible proof that something will work out. But real opportunities often arrive disguised as inconvenience, uncertainty, extra responsibility, temporary discomfort, or work that feels too small to matter. This is why so many people miss the very things that could have changed their lives. The human brain naturally avoids uncertainty because uncertainty feels dangerous. People are emotionally drawn toward comfort, familiarity, and guaranteed outcomes. When an opportunity requires risk, patience, embarrassment, or effort without immediate reward, the mind quickly labels it as unattractive or unimportant. The disturbing part is that opportunities often appear before a person feels ready for them. A difficult job offer, a business idea with no proof yet, a chance to speak publicly, learning a skill nobody around you understands, or starting something while nobody believes in you. These moments rarely feel glamorous in real time. In fact, they often feel stressful, awkward, and emotionally uncomfortable. What makes this even creepier is how obvious opportunities become only after someone else succeeds with them. Once results appear, people suddenly call the opportunity lucky or smart, forgetting that earlier it looked uncertain, risky, and unimpressive to almost everyone. Many people unknowingly train themselves to ignore opportunities because they judge value emotionally instead of strategically. If something does not instantly feel exciting, profitable, or socially impressive, they overlook it completely. The frightening reality is that some of the biggest turning points in life arrive quietly, disguised as small beginnings, difficult responsibilities, lonely decisions, or uncomfortable chances that most people reject simply because they do not immediately look like success. You will not become disciplined by waiting to feel ready. One of the biggest lies people unconsciously believe is that discipline begins after motivation, confidence, or emotional readiness appears. They wait for the perfect mood, the perfect mindset, or the perfect moment before taking action. But discipline does not arrive before action. It is created through action. The unsettling truth is that most disciplined people started while feeling tired, uncertain, distracted, afraid, or emotionally unprepared. The human brain naturally avoids discomfort and seeks emotional safety. Waiting feels safer than beginning because action creates the possibility of failure, embarrassment, and disappointment. As long as someone keeps saying, "I'll start when I'm ready," they protect themselves from confronting their limitations. But readiness is often an illusion. Most people never feel fully prepared before doing difficult things. What makes this psychological trap dangerous is that hesitation slowly becomes identity. The longer someone delays action, the more normal avoidance starts feeling. Days turn into months, months turn into years. Eventually, the person no longer struggles with discipline alone. They begin struggling with self-trust because they have repeatedly trained themselves not to follow through. The disturbing part is that discipline often feels unnatural in the beginning. Waking up early feels painful. Consistency feels repetitive. Focus feels exhausting. The brain interprets discomfort as a sign to stop, even when discomfort is actually proof that growth is happening. This is why emotionally driven people often remain trapped in cycles of inconsistency. They obey feelings instead of building systems stronger than feelings. The creepiest part is realizing that many people spend their entire lives waiting for a version of themselves that only appears after they start. Confidence, discipline, and mental strength are not prerequisites for action. They are the psychological consequences of repeated action taken before comfort ever arrives. The people who mock your focus will later ask how you did it. One of the strangest patterns in human behavior is how people often criticize discipline before they admire the results it creates. In the beginning, focus looks excessive to others. Your routines seem boring. Your sacrifices appear unnecessary. People joke about your seriousness, your schedule, your goals, or the amount of time you spend improving yourself. What they are really reacting to is the discomfort of watching someone choose long-term growth over short-term comfort. The human mind naturally seeks belonging, which is why focused people often experience subtle social resistance early on. Friends may pressure you to relax more. Family may question why you are changing. Others may call you obsessed, selfish, or unrealistic simply because your discipline exposes how undisciplined they feel around you. Most people do not consciously realize they are doing this. Your focus silently forces them to confront the gap between what they want and what they are willing to sacrifice. What makes this dynamic disturbing is how quickly attitudes change once results become visible. The same people who laughed at your consistency suddenly become curious when success starts appearing publicly. Once the sacrifices begin producing confidence, money, skill, opportunities, or transformation, the mockery slowly turns into admiration. People start asking for advice they once ignored. They begin studying habits they previously dismissed. The creepiest part is that many people only respect discipline after society validates it with visible success. Before the results appear, your focus looks strange. After the results appear, the exact same behavior suddenly looks intelligent, inspiring, and powerful. This reveals an uncomfortable truth about human psychology. Many people do not judge the process itself. They judge whether the outcome eventually makes the sacrifice socially acceptable. You cannot build a new life with the same old tolerance for nonsense. One of the harshest realities about personal growth is that your future is heavily shaped by what you continue allowing into your life. Many people dream about success, peace, discipline, confidence, or financial freedom while still tolerating the same distractions, toxic habits, unhealthy relationships, excuses, and emotional chaos that destroyed their progress before. They want transformation without changing what they emotionally accept on a daily basis. The human mind adapts to whatever it repeatedly experiences. If someone constantly tolerates disrespect, laziness, drama, procrastination, negativity, or endless distractions, those things slowly become psychologically normal. Over time, the brain stops resisting them. What once felt harmful begins feeling familiar, and familiarity is dangerously comfortable even when it damages growth. This is why major life changes often require painful shifts in standards. A person trying to improve can no longer tolerate wasting entire days scrolling endlessly, staying around people who mock ambition, ignoring responsibilities, or constantly choosing short-term comfort over long-term goals. The old tolerance level becomes incompatible with the new life they claim to want. The unsettling part is that raising standards changes relationships and identity at the same time. Some people become uncomfortable when they can no longer access the old version of you. Others may accuse you of becoming distant, serious, selfish, or too different, simply because you stopped entertaining behaviors that once kept you stuck alongside them. Over time, every tolerated behavior quietly shapes destiny. Small compromises repeated daily become life patterns. The environments, conversations, and habits you continue accepting slowly decide the direction of your future more than your goals ever will. The creepiest part is that people often do not realize how much nonsense they tolerate until they finally experience peace, discipline, or progress for the first time. Suddenly, the chaos they once called normal begins looking deeply destructive and emotionally exhausting. Success does not care how hard your childhood was. One of the cruelest realities about life is that the world may sympathize with your pain, but success itself remains emotionally indifferent to it. A difficult childhood can explain many struggles, fears, insecurities, and emotional wounds, but it does not automatically remove the responsibility of growth. This is what makes the truth so psychologically painful. Many people secretly believe their suffering should eventually guarantee reward, fairness, or understanding from life itself. But success does not operate on sympathy. It responds to preparation, discipline, adaptation, and action. People who grew up in difficult environments often carry invisible emotional weight into adulthood. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, trust issues, anger, low self-worth, emotional instability, or survival habits developed during childhood can quietly shape every decision they make. The disturbing part is that these patterns may feel completely normal because they were formed so early that the person mistakes them for personality rather than unresolved conditioning. What makes this even harder is that trauma can create emotional exhaustion that others cannot see. Some people spend years fighting battles internally while trying to function normally on the outside. Yet life continues demanding performance regardless of what someone survived. Bills still arrive. Opportunities still require courage. Discipline still matters. Time still moves. The creepiest part is realizing that pain can become psychologically addictive. Some people become so attached to their suffering that it quietly becomes part of their identity. Without realizing it, they begin using past pain to explain every present limitation, even when growth is still possible. The frightening truth is that a hard childhood may not have been your fault, but eventually your healing, discipline, emotional control, and future become your responsibility, whether life prepared you fairly for that responsibility or not. Your dream needs a system, not just excitement. One of the harshest realities about ambition is that excitement alone is too unstable to build anything meaningful. In the beginning, dreams feel emotionally powerful. The imagination creates visions of success, freedom, recognition, and transformation that generate intense motivation. But emotions fade faster than people expect. Eventually, the excitement disappears, and all that remains is the system a person built, or failed to build, when motivation was high. The human mind loves inspiration because inspiration feels alive. It creates emotional energy without demanding immediate sacrifice. Systems, however, feel boring and restrictive. Routines, schedules, habits, repetition, planning, and structure do not create the same emotional rush. Yet those quiet systems are usually the only reason successful people continue progressing long after motivation fades away. What makes this psychological reality so unsettling is that many people become addicted to dreaming instead of building. They consume motivational content, visualize success, talk passionately about goals, and feel emotionally connected to the future they want. But without systems, their progress depends entirely on mood. On good days, they work intensely. On difficult days, everything collapses. Over time, this creates a cycle of emotional inconsistency. A person repeatedly starts strong, loses momentum, feels guilty, becomes re-inspired, and starts again from the beginning. Years can disappear inside this loop, while very little actually changes externally. The creepiest part is that systems slowly shape identity without requiring constant emotional effort. A disciplined routine continues, even when excitement dies. Habits keep moving when feelings become unstable. Eventually, the person who once depended on motivation becomes someone who operates automatically. Most people fail not because their dreams were impossible, but because they relied on temporary emotional excitement to carry goals that required permanent structure. Nobody owes you attention because you worked hard. One of the most painful realities about success is realizing that effort alone does not guarantee recognition. Many people secretly believe the world will eventually reward them simply because they worked hard, stayed loyal, or sacrificed deeply enough. But reality is far colder than that. Hard work matters, but attention is not handed out based on effort alone. The world notices value, visibility, timing, emotional impact, and usefulness far more than struggle itself. This truth becomes emotionally difficult because human beings naturally want fairness. When someone spends years practicing, building, or sacrificing, they expect validation to follow automatically. So when nobody notices, resentment quietly begins growing underneath the surface. People start believing they are being ignored, overlooked, or treated unfairly, when sometimes the real issue is that effort was never communicated, positioned, or directed effectively. The disturbing part is that the world cannot see invisible effort. Thousands of people are working hard every day. Some are talented, some are disciplined, some are suffering quietly while chasing goals nobody understands. But attention is limited, and society responds most strongly to outcomes that capture emotion, solve problems, or create impact people can immediately recognize. This is why many hardworking people become emotionally exhausted. They confuse effort with entitlement to recognition. Over time, frustration builds because they feel the universe should reward them by now. But success often requires learning how to present value, communicate clearly, and survive long periods without applause. The creepiest part is that some people become addicted to the identity of being overlooked. They use hard work itself as emotional proof of superiority, while secretly avoiding the uncomfortable truth that effort without adaptation can become a trap. Eventually, they stop improving because they become more emotionally attached to being unrecognized than to becoming undeniable. Being tired is not always a sign to stop. Sometimes it is a sign to become organized. One of the most misleading feelings in modern life is exhaustion. Many people automatically assume that being tired means they are working too hard, pushing too much, or reaching their limit. But in many cases, the exhaustion is not coming from effort itself. It is coming from disorder. A disorganized mind quietly drains energy faster than hard work ever could. The human brain becomes overwhelmed when too many unfinished tasks, distractions, emotional pressures, and decisions compete for attention at the same time. Constant switching between responsibilities forces the mind into a state of mental chaos. Over time, this creates emotional fatigue that feels heavy even when very little meaningful progress is being made. People often mistake this scattered exhaustion for overwork, when in reality they are simply overloaded by confusion and lack of structure. The unsettling part is that disorganization creates invisible stress. Unclear priorities produce anxiety. Delayed responsibilities quietly stay in the background of the mind all day. Cluttered environments increase mental tension without people noticing. Endless distractions force the brain to repeatedly restart focus, which slowly destroys energy and concentration. A person can spend an entire day busy, yet still feel mentally exhausted because their attention was constantly fragmented. This is why organized people often appear calmer, even while handling more responsibility. Systems reduce emotional chaos. Routines remove unnecessary decisions. Clear priorities conserve mental energy. Structure creates psychological stability that protects the mind from constant overwhelm. The creepiest part is that exhaustion can become so normal that people stop questioning its source. They believe they need less ambition, less responsibility, or less effort when what they truly need is less chaos. Sometimes the mind is not asking you to quit. It is asking you to create order before the disorder quietly consumes your energy completely. Your habits are more honest than your goals. One of the most uncomfortable truths about human behavior is that goals often reveal what people wish they were, while habits reveal who they truly are. Anyone can speak confidently about dreams, ambition, discipline, or future plans. But the mind eventually exposes itself through repeated daily behavior. Habits are brutally honest because they operate when emotions fade, motivation disappears, and nobody is watching. This is why people often become shocked by their own results. They focus on intentions while ignoring patterns. Someone may say they want success, health, confidence, money, or peace, but their daily habits quietly move them in the opposite direction. The frightening part is that habits work automatically. Over time, repeated behavior becomes so normal that people stop questioning it entirely, even when it is slowly damaging their future. The brain is designed to conserve energy, which means habits eventually become subconscious routines. This creates a disturbing psychological conflict where a person's conscious goals and unconscious behavior begin fighting each other. They genuinely want a better life emotionally, but their habits remain loyal to comfort, distraction, procrastination, and short-term pleasure. What makes this even creepier is how small habits disguise their long-term consequences. A wasted hour feels harmless. One unhealthy decision seems insignificant. One delay feels temporary. But habits compound quietly beneath awareness like water slowly shaping stone. Months later, people suddenly confront outcomes they emotionally feel they never chose, even though their routines were building those outcomes every single day. Successful people eventually realize something most others avoid accepting. The future is rarely created by dramatic decisions alone. It is usually created by repeated ordinary behaviors that seem unimportant in the moment. The frightening reality is that your habits tell the truth. Your emotions often try to hide. Long before results appear publicly, your routines already reveal the direction your life is moving in privately. Most people secretly prefer familiar pain over unfamiliar growth. One of the darkest truths about human psychology is that people often remain trapped in situations that hurt them simply because those situations feel familiar. The human mind is deeply attached to predictability, even when that predictability causes suffering. Familiar pain feels emotionally safer than unfamiliar growth because at least the person knows what to expect. Growth, on the other hand, introduces uncertainty, vulnerability, and the terrifying possibility of becoming someone completely different. This is why many people stay in unhealthy relationships, toxic environments, self-destructive habits, and limiting routines long after they know those things are damaging them. The pain becomes psychologically normal. Over time, discomfort transforms into identity. A person adapts to stress, disappointment, insecurity, or failure so completely that the idea of change starts feeling more frightening than the pain itself. What makes this even more unsettling is that unfamiliar growth often feels emotionally wrong in the beginning. New habits feel uncomfortable. Better standards feel lonely. Discipline feels restrictive. Confidence feels unnatural. The brain interprets unfamiliar experiences as danger, even when those experiences are actually leading toward improvement. This causes many people to unconsciously sabotage progress just to return to emotional familiarity. The disturbing part is that people will often complain about the very situations they secretly refuse to leave, not because they enjoy suffering, but because suffering they understand feels safer than growth they cannot predict. The mind would rather repeat known pain than risk losing control inside an unfamiliar future. The creepiest part is realizing that some people are not truly afraid of failure. They are afraid of transformation, because growth eventually demands the death of old behaviors, old identities, old environments, and sometimes even old relationships. And many people would rather suffer inside familiarity than face the uncertainty required to evolve. You may have to become misunderstood before you become respected. One of the most uncomfortable parts of personal growth is realizing that people often misunderstand transformation while it is happening. Before success becomes visible, your decisions can look strange, selfish, obsessive, or unrealistic to others. The same behaviors that later earn respect usually create confusion, first because most people judge change based on what feels familiar to them, not based on where your actions might eventually lead. Human beings naturally trust patterns they already recognize. When you begin changing your habits, mindset, priorities, or ambitions, you quietly disrupt the expectations people built around your old identity. Some people become uncomfortable because your growth no longer matches the version of you they emotionally understand. Others interpret your focus as arrogance simply because you stopped behaving in ways that made them comfortable. What makes this psychologically difficult is that misunderstanding creates isolation. You may feel alone even while surrounded by people. Conversations begin feeling different. Support becomes weaker. People question your choices, your routines, or your goals with subtle skepticism that slowly affects your emotions. The brain craves social acceptance, so being misunderstood can trigger deep self-doubt even when you are moving in the right direction. The disturbing part is that respect often arrives only after visible proof appears. Once results become undeniable, people rewrite the story. The discipline they mocked suddenly becomes vision. The boundaries they criticized suddenly become maturity. The risks they feared suddenly become bravery. Society frequently respects outcomes long before it respects the process that created them. The creepiest part is that many people abandon their transformation too early because they cannot emotionally tolerate being misunderstood. They return to old behaviors, not because those behaviors are better, but because temporary acceptance feels safer than continuing down a path where nobody fully understands who they are becoming yet. Consistency will embarrass talent that refuses discipline. One of the most uncomfortable truths about success is that raw talent creates illusions of superiority early in life. Talented people often learn quickly, receive praise easily, and stand out without needing much effort. Because of this, many begin relying on natural ability instead of building discipline. At first, this works. They outperform others with less preparation, less structure, and less sacrifice. But over time, something unsettling happens. The disciplined person slowly becomes impossible to compete with. Consistency has a psychological power that talent alone cannot sustain. A disciplined person improves steadily, even during boredom, stress, frustration, or emotional lows. Meanwhile, talented people who lack discipline often become trapped by their dependence on mood and motivation. They work intensely when inspired, then disappear when things stop feeling exciting. This creates a hidden instability beneath their potential. The disturbing part is that talent can secretly weaken someone emotionally because success came easily at first, They never fully developed patience, resilience, or long-term work habits. The moment they encounter serious competition, criticism, or difficulty, frustration appears quickly. Their identity becomes tied to being naturally gifted, so struggling feels emotionally threatening instead of normal. Meanwhile, consistent people quietly build skills through repetition. They become stronger while nobody notices. They improve through routines that feel boring and ordinary. Over months and years, this steady progress compounds into something terrifyingly powerful. Eventually, the disciplined person surpasses the talented person so completely that the difference becomes embarrassing. The creepiest part is that talent often creates false confidence. People assume natural ability guarantees long-term success, while underestimating the destructive power of inconsistency. In the end, discipline usually wins because consistency keeps moving long after talent becomes distracted, emotional, arrogant, or exhausted. If you keep negotiating with your laziness, your future will lose. One of the most dangerous psychological habits a person can develop is constantly bargaining with their own laziness. It rarely appears dramatic in the beginning. Instead, it sounds harmless and reasonable. I'll start tomorrow. One more hour won't matter. I'm not in the mood today. The mind becomes incredibly skilled at creating comfortable excuses that feel emotionally justified in the moment but quietly steal progress over time. What makes laziness so frightening is that it rarely presents itself honestly. It disguises itself as exhaustion, overthinking, stress, waiting for motivation, or needing the perfect time. Sometimes people are genuinely tired, but many times the brain is simply trying to avoid discomfort. Human beings naturally resist effort because effort requires energy, uncertainty, and emotional friction. The mind constantly searches for the easiest possible path, even when that path slowly destroys long-term potential. The disturbing part is that every time you negotiate with laziness, you strengthen it psychologically. The brain learns that discomfort can be escaped through delay. Over time, avoidance stops feeling like a decision and starts becoming automatic behavior. Eventually, even small tasks begin feeling mentally overwhelming because the habit of postponing effort has become deeply conditioned. What makes this even creepier is that laziness often steals life quietly rather than dramatically. Years disappear through endless postponement. Dreams slowly weaken under repeated delay. Opportunities vanish while a person keeps convincing themselves they still have plenty of time left. Meanwhile, disciplined people experience the opposite effect. Each time they act despite resistance, they train the brain to tolerate discomfort more easily. Action becomes normal instead of avoidance. The frightening reality is that your future is shaped less by your intentions and more by the daily battles between discipline and comfort that nobody else ever sees. Success often requires doing simple things for an unreasonable amount of time. One of the hardest realities for people to accept is that success is usually far less dramatic than they imagined. Most breakthroughs are not created by one massive moment of genius or motivation. They are built through painfully repetitive actions performed consistently for far longer than most people can emotionally tolerate. The tasks themselves are often simple. The real difficulty comes from continuing long after excitement disappears. The human mind naturally craves visible progress and emotional stimulation. Repetition feels boring because the brain quickly adapts to routines and stops receiving the emotional reward it felt in the beginning. This is why many people constantly search for new strategies, shortcuts, or motivation instead of mastering the basics they already know work. They underestimate how psychologically difficult consistency becomes over time. What makes this reality so unsettling is that simple actions often look meaningless while they are being repeated. Writing every day feels insignificant. Exercising daily feels slow. Saving small amounts of money feels pointless. Practicing the same skill repeatedly feels frustrating. But hidden beneath that repetition, invisible changes are quietly accumulating. Skills sharpen, confidence deepens, discipline strengthens, identity slowly transforms. The disturbing part is that most people quit right before repetition begins producing visible results. They become emotionally exhausted by monotony and mistake boredom for failure. Meanwhile, the people who succeed are often not more talented. They are simply more willing to tolerate repetition without immediate emotional reward. The creepiest part is realizing that greatness often looks painfully ordinary up close. Behind impressive outcomes are usually years of simple habits, repeated in silence while nobody paid attention. Success is often less about intelligence or talent and more about the ability to keep doing small, unexciting things long enough for those things to completely reshape your future. Your standards decide your circle. Before your circle decides your future, one of the most unsettling truths about human relationships is that the people surrounding you are often reflections of what you tolerate, normalize, and emotionally accept. Many people believe their environment controls their future, but they rarely realize that their personal standards quietly determine what kind of environment they allow into their life in the first place. Before your circle shapes you, your standards shape your circle. Standards are not just rules about success or ambition. They influence who gets access to your time, your energy, your attention, and your emotional space. Low standards attract chaos because they allow disrespect, laziness, dishonesty, negativity, and constant distraction to remain present without consequences. High standards create discomfort at first because they require distance from people, habits, and environments that once felt normal. What makes this psychologically difficult is that raising standards often creates loneliness before it creates improvement. The moment someone stops tolerating certain behaviors, relationships begin changing automatically. Some people become defensive, others disappear quietly. Many relationships survive only because unhealthy patterns were previously being accepted without resistance. The disturbing part is that human beings unconsciously adapt to the emotional expectations of the people around them. If everyone in your environment normalizes excuses, emotional instability, distraction, or lack of discipline, your brain slowly starts treating those behaviors as acceptable. Standards weaken through repetition long before people consciously notice it happening. The creepiest part is that many people never intentionally choose their circle at all. They inherit it through convenience, history, familiarity, or fear of isolation. Over time, their standards quietly lower to maintain belonging. Eventually, they wake up surrounded by people who reinforce the exact habits, mindsets, and emotional patterns, keeping them trapped in the same life they secretly want to escape from. The world rewards usefulness more than intentions. One of the harshest realities people eventually discover is that good intentions alone rarely change their life. The world may appreciate kindness, dreams, passion, or potential emotionally, but in practical reality, people are usually rewarded for the value they consistently provide. Someone can have a pure heart, strong ambitions, and endless ideas, yet still struggle if they never become genuinely useful to others in a meaningful way. This truth feels uncomfortable because human beings naturally judge themselves by intention. People focus on what they meant to do, what they hope to become, or how much effort they plan to give. But the outside world judges results differently. Employers reward competence, businesses reward value, audiences reward usefulness. Opportunities flow toward people who solve problems, create value, reduce pain, save time, entertain, teach, or improve the lives of others in some practical form. The unsettling part is that effort itself is often invisible. The world does not automatically reward struggle, exhaustion, or sacrifice if those things fail to produce meaningful outcomes. This creates a painful psychological gap between how people see themselves internally and how reality responds externally. Someone may feel they deserve success because of their intentions, while reality responds only to the usefulness of their actions. Over time, this truth becomes emotionally difficult for many people to accept. It forces them to stop relying on potential and start developing real skills, discipline, communication, reliability, or problem-solving ability. Good intentions may make someone likable, but usefulness makes them valuable. The creepiest part is that society often sounds emotionally supportive while operating practically. People will encourage dreams publicly, but opportunities quietly move toward those who can consistently deliver value under pressure. In the end, usefulness creates trust because it proves that someone can turn thought into real-world impact instead of remaining trapped in endless intention. Nobody cares about your potential until it becomes proof. One of the harshest realities about human nature is that potential is mostly invisible to the world until it produces visible results. People love the idea of talent in theory, but in reality, society responds far more strongly to evidence than possibility. You may know how intelligent, creative, hardworking, or capable you truly are, but until those abilities create measurable outcomes, most people remain emotionally unconvinced. This is what makes unrealized potential psychologically painful. Deep inside, many people feel they are capable of much more than their current situation reflects. They imagine the future version of themselves clearly in their mind, but the outside world cannot see intentions, hidden talent, or private ambition. It only reacts to what has already been demonstrated publicly. The disturbing part is how quickly people's perception changes once proof appears. Before results, your goals sound unrealistic, risky, or even foolish. Some people ignore you completely. Others quietly doubt you. But the moment visible success arrives, the exact same abilities people once overlooked suddenly become impressive, admirable, and obvious. Human beings naturally trust outcomes more than promises. What makes this even creepier is that potential can become emotionally addictive. Some people fall in love with imagining what they could become instead of building the painful systems required to actually become it. They protect the fantasy of greatness while avoiding the uncomfortable work that would test whether that greatness is real. This creates a dangerous psychological trap where people begin identifying themselves by future possibilities instead of present actions. Over time, they become emotionally attached to potential while remaining terrified of failure because failure would force them to confront reality instead of imagination. The frightening truth is that the world rarely rewards hidden capability alone. Potential only starts changing your life when discipline transforms it into undeniable proof that other people can no longer ignore, dismiss, or question. You can love your family and still need distance to grow. One of the most emotionally confusing realities about growth is realizing that love and distance can exist at the same time. Many people are taught to believe that needing space from family automatically means disloyalty, selfishness, or lack of love. But sometimes, the environments closest to you are also the environments most deeply connected to your old identity, old fears, old habits, and old limitations. Growth can become extremely difficult when people constantly relate to who you used to be instead of who you are trying to become. Families often create powerful emotional patterns without realizing it. Certain roles become unconsciously assigned over time. One person is always seen as irresponsible, another as weak, another as the successful one, another as the helper who must always sacrifice for everyone else. Even when someone begins changing, families sometimes continue interacting with them through the lens of the past. This can make personal transformation feel emotionally exhausting. The unsettling part is that people closest to you may unintentionally resist your growth because change disrupts emotional familiarity. Your new boundaries may feel cold to them. Your ambition may feel distant. Your discipline may feel judgmental. Without meaning to, family members can sometimes pull a person back toward old behaviors simply because those behaviors feel more comfortable and predictable. What makes this especially painful is that guilt becomes involved. A person may deeply love their family while simultaneously realizing that constant exposure to certain dynamics damages their mental clarity, confidence, or focus. This creates an emotional conflict where distance feels necessary for growth, but emotionally painful at the same time. The creepiest part is realizing that some people never fully become themselves because they spend their entire lives trying to remain emotionally acceptable to environments that were only designed for older versions of them. Sometimes growth requires temporary distance, not because love disappeared, but because identity cannot fully evolve inside constant familiarity. Some people call you selfish when you stop being easy to use. One of the darkest realities about human relationships is that not everyone benefits from your growth emotionally. Some people become comfortable with the version of you that constantly says yes, stays available, avoids conflict, sacrifices personal needs, and tolerates behavior that quietly drains your energy. The moment you begin setting boundaries, protecting your time, or prioritizing your own well-being, their perception of you suddenly changes. What makes this disturbing is how quickly kindness can stop being appreciated once people become dependent on access to it. Behaviors that once made you good, loyal, or helpful suddenly become expectations instead of choices. Over time, some relationships quietly develop around convenience rather than genuine respect. People start feeling entitled to your emotional labor, your availability, your patience, or your constant support without realizing it consciously. The human mind dislikes losing emotional comfort, which is why boundaries often trigger strong reactions. When you stop over-explaining, stop rescuing everyone, or stop tolerating disrespect, some people interpret your self-respect as rejection. Instead of adjusting to the healthier version of you, they may accuse you of changing, becoming cold, arrogant, or selfish. In reality, they are reacting to the loss of control and familiarity they previously benefited from. The unsettling part is that guilt becomes one of the strongest weapons used against people trying to grow. Many individuals return to unhealthy patterns simply because they cannot emotionally tolerate disappointing others. They confuse self-neglect with kindness and emotional exhaustion with loyalty. The creepiest part is that some people never truly valued your happiness at all. They valued your usefulness. The moment you become harder to manipulate, easier to lose, or less willing to sacrifice yourself for their comfort, the affection they showed begins fading in ways that reveal what the relationship may have actually been built on from the beginning. Your emotions are real, but they are not always good leaders. One of the most dangerous misconceptions people believe is that emotions should always be trusted simply because they feel intense. Emotions are real, powerful, and deeply human, but they are also temporary reactions shaped by fear, stress, insecurity, past experiences, exhaustion, and impulse. Just because a feeling feels strong does not mean it is guiding you toward the right decision. The human brain is designed to react emotionally before it reacts logically. Fear appears before analysis. Anger appears before understanding. Anxiety creates imagined threats before reality is fully examined. This survival wiring once protected human beings from danger, but in modern life, it often creates psychological chaos. A person can feel rejected when nobody intended harm. They can feel hopeless during temporary setbacks. They can feel confident while making destructive decisions. The unsettling part is that emotions are highly persuasive internally. When sadness appears, the mind begins searching for evidence that life is falling apart. When insecurity appears, the brain suddenly notices every weakness. When anger appears, people temporarily lose perspective and justify behaviors they later regret. In emotional moments, the mind becomes extremely convincing because it is trying to protect immediate feelings rather than long-term consequences. This is why emotionally reactive people often sabotage their own progress without realizing it. They quit too early because frustration feels unbearable. They destroy relationships during moments of anger. They avoid opportunities because fear feels like danger. Over time, emotions begin controlling behavior instead of simply informing it. The creepiest part is that emotions can completely reshape reality in someone's mind for a short period of time. A temporary feeling can convince a person to make permanent decisions. This is why emotional control becomes one of the most powerful psychological skills a person can develop, because feelings are real, but they are not always wise enough to lead your life. Most people quit because progress arrives quietly. One of the most psychologically frustrating parts of success is that progress usually happens too slowly and too quietly for the human mind to notice in real time. People expect transformation to feel dramatic. They want clear signs, instant validation, and visible proof that their effort is working. But real growth often happens silently beneath the surface, long before external results appear. This creates a dangerous emotional trap because the brain naturally depends on feedback to stay motivated. When progress feels invisible, people begin doubting themselves. They question their ability, their strategy, and even their purpose. The frightening part is that many people quit during periods when they were actually improving the most, because improvement did not feel emotionally exciting enough to trust. At first, the changes are almost impossible to notice. Skills sharpen gradually. Discipline strengthens quietly. Confidence becomes slightly calmer. Knowledge deepens little by little. These tiny shifts seem insignificant individually, which makes people underestimate the power of repetition. Human beings are emotionally drawn toward immediate rewards, so slow progress often feels emotionally identical to failure. What makes this even creepier is how suddenly progress appears visible after remaining hidden for so long. To outsiders, success can look instant or lucky, but the person experiencing it knows the truth. The results were building silently through countless unnoticed days where nothing felt different at all. The disturbing reality is that consistency requires faith in invisible growth. You continue working while feeling uncertain. You continue practicing while feeling average. You continue building while your emotions tell you nothing is happening. Most people cannot tolerate this stage psychologically. They need constant proof to continue. The frightening truth is that many dreams die, not because people lacked talent or opportunity, but because they abandoned the process during the quiet phase where progress was already happening, invisibly beneath the surface. The longer you avoid the hard thing, the heavier it becomes. One of the most disturbing psychological realities is that avoided problems rarely stay the same size inside the mind. The longer a person avoids something difficult, the more emotionally powerful and frightening it becomes. A hard conversation turns into anxiety. A delayed decision turns into pressure. A small responsibility slowly transforms into mental exhaustion. What could have been handled early begins growing quietly in the background until it feels overwhelming. The human brain is designed to avoid discomfort whenever possible. In the short term, avoidance creates relief. Ignoring the problem feels calming because the mind escapes immediate stress. But that relief is temporary. Beneath the surface, the brain continues tracking unresolved tension. Even while distracted, a person often feels a quiet mental weight following them throughout the day. Avoidance may remove discomfort temporarily, but it also keeps fear alive. What makes this psychological trap so dangerous is that imagination usually exaggerates the difficulty over time. The mind starts creating worst-case scenarios, making the avoided task appear larger, riskier, and more emotionally painful than it actually is. Eventually, people become more afraid of the thought of the problem than the problem itself. The unsettling part is that avoidance slowly damages self-trust. Each time a person postpones something important, they unconsciously teach themselves that discomfort controls them. Confidence weakens because confidence is built through confrontation, not escape. Over time, even small challenges can begin feeling emotionally heavy because the brain becomes conditioned to retreat instead of act. The creepiest part is realizing that many people are not trapped by the hard thing itself. They are trapped by the fear they allowed to grow around it through prolonged avoidance. Often, the moment they finally confront the problem, they discover it was never as terrifying as the version their mind spent months creating in silence. Success is not built by big moves alone. It is built by small moves, repeated without drama. One of the biggest psychological illusions about success is the belief that life changes through dramatic moments alone. People are naturally attracted to huge breakthroughs, massive risks, motivational speeches, and overnight transformations because dramatic change feels emotionally exciting. But the unsettling reality is that most successful lives are not built through constant intensity. They are built through small, repetitive actions performed quietly for long periods of time without emotional drama attached to them. The human brain struggles with this because repetition feels insignificant while it is happening. Waking up early one day changes nothing. Practicing a skill for 1 hour seems meaningless. Saving a small amount of money feels too slow. Exercising once barely affects the body, but repeated consistently, these small actions begin altering identity, habits, opportunities, and outcomes in ways people rarely notice until the transformation becomes impossible to ignore. What makes this difficult emotionally is that small progress rarely provides immediate validation. There are no dramatic signs proving the process is working. Most days feel ordinary. This is why many people abandon consistency. They mistake lack of excitement for lack of progress and begin chasing emotional highs instead of stable systems. The disturbing part is that success often looks boring from the inside. While others search for shortcuts, dramatic motivation, or instant results, disciplined people quietly repeat behaviors that seem too simple to matter. Over time, those ordinary actions compound into extraordinary differences. The creepiest part is that small, repeated behaviors slowly reshape a person without them realizing it. Tiny daily choices become personality. Personality becomes lifestyle. Lifestyle becomes destiny. Years later, people call it talent, luck, or natural success without seeing the invisible repetition that quietly built everything underneath it, one ordinary day at a time. You will never feel fully confident before the first serious step. One of the greatest psychological traps people fall into is believing confidence must come before action. They wait for the perfect feeling, the perfect mindset, or the complete absence of fear before finally moving towards something important. But confidence rarely arrives in advance. In most cases, confidence is created after action, not before it. The mind wants certainty before risk, yet life almost never offers that guarantee. The human brain is naturally designed to avoid uncertainty because uncertainty feels dangerous. Whenever someone faces a major decision, a new opportunity, public exposure, or a meaningful life change, the brain immediately begins imagining failure, embarrassment, rejection, and regret. This creates the illusion that fear means you are not ready, when often it simply means the situation matters deeply to you. The unsettling part is that people often spend years preparing emotionally instead of progressing practically. They overthink, research endlessly, delay decisions, and wait for a future version of themselves that feels fearless enough to begin. But that version never truly arrives. Even highly successful people often feel anxiety before major moves. The difference is that they act despite uncertainty instead of demanding emotional comfort first. What makes this so psychologically difficult is that the first serious step changes identity. Starting forces reality to replace fantasy. Dreams become measurable. Failure becomes possible. Other people can now judge your effort publicly. This exposure terrifies the ego because imagination feels safer than real-world risk. The creepiest part is that hesitation often disguises itself as intelligence. People convince themselves they are being careful, responsible, or strategic, while secretly avoiding the emotional discomfort of beginning. Meanwhile, life keeps moving forward in the background. Eventually, many realize that confidence was never something waiting at the starting line. It was something built slowly through surviving the very experiences they were afraid to face in the first place. Your environment can either feed your ambition or slowly bury it. One of the creepiest truths about human behavior is how strongly people absorb the energy, habits, beliefs, and limitations of the environments around them without even realizing it. Most people believe their decisions are entirely independent, but over time, surroundings quietly shape thinking patterns, confidence levels, emotional standards, and even what feels normal to pursue in life. An environment does not need to openly destroy ambition to kill it. Sometimes it happens subtly. Constant negativity, small jokes about success, friends with no goals, endless distractions, people who normalize laziness, gossip, emotional chaos, or low standards. At first, these things seem harmless because they happen gradually, but human beings naturally adapt to whatever surrounds them repeatedly. The disturbing part is that environments shape identity through repetition. If someone spends enough time around people who avoid discipline, eventually discipline starts feeling extreme. If nobody around them dreams bigger, ambition starts feeling unrealistic or embarrassing. Slowly, the mind begins shrinking its expectations to match the emotional atmosphere it lives inside every day. What makes this even creepier is that toxic environments often feel comfortable because familiarity creates psychological safety. People remain in places that are slowly damaging them simply because those places feel emotionally predictable. Growth becomes frightening because growth often requires separation from environments tied to identity, relationships, and routine. On the other hand, the right environment quietly changes behavior without force. Being surrounded by disciplined, focused, emotionally stable, or ambitious people naturally raises personal standards. Effort begins feeling normal instead of exhausting. Improvement starts feeling possible instead of unrealistic. The frightening reality is that many people are not failing purely because of lack of talent. They are living in environments that slowly drain motivation, weaken discipline, reward distraction, and normalize mediocrity until ambition quietly suffocates beneath the emotional weight of everything surrounding them every single day. People may doubt you because they are measuring you by who you used to be. One of the strangest realities about personal growth is that people often struggle to accept change in someone they have known for a long time. Human beings mentally freeze others into familiar identities. Once someone has seen you insecure, immature, unsuccessful, awkward, weak, or lost, their mind may continue associating you with that version long after you have changed. This is why growth can feel emotionally lonely, even when progress is real. The unsettling part is that people are often more attached to your past than your potential. They remember your old mistakes, old habits, old failures, and old limitations because those memories make your identity predictable to them. When you begin improving, it quietly disrupts the image they built of you in their mind. Some people adjust and support your growth. Others resist it unconsciously because your transformation forces them to rethink what they believed about you. This is why doubt often increases right before visible success appears. The more serious your growth becomes, the more uncomfortable it can make people who still emotionally relate to the old version of you. They may laugh at your new discipline, question your ambition, or subtly remind you of who you used to be. Sometimes this happens because they genuinely cannot imagine you differently. Other times, it happens because your growth threatens the emotional balance they were comfortable with. What makes this especially painful is that the people doubting you are sometimes those closest to you. They watched your failures for years, so your transformation feels unbelievable to them. Meanwhile, strangers who never knew your old identity may support you faster because they only see your current energy and direction. The creepiest part is realizing that if you keep needing everyone to update their perception of you before you grow, you may never fully evolve at all. Sometimes transformation requires continuing forward, while others are still mentally speaking to the person you no longer are. The reward usually comes after the version of you who wanted it has already changed. One of the strangest psychological realities about success is that people often imagine achieving their goals will finally complete them emotionally. They picture a future moment where the reward arrives and everything suddenly feels meaningful, exciting, and permanent. But what many do not realize is that the process of chasing a goal quietly changes their identity long before the reward ever appears. By the time success finally arrives, the version of them who desperately wanted it often no longer exists in the same way. At the beginning, ambition is usually driven by emotion. People want success to prove something, escape something, heal insecurity, gain attention, feel respected, or finally feel enough. The goal becomes emotionally charged because it represents relief, validation, or transformation. But the longer someone stays committed to the process, the more discipline, struggle, repetition, sacrifice, and failure begin reshaping their mindset from underneath. The disturbing part is that growth changes desire itself. The person who once craved approval may slowly stop caring about validation. The person obsessed with money may start valuing peace more. The insecure version of someone may disappear before the external success they chased even arrives. What once felt emotionally urgent begins losing its psychological power because the process already transformed the person internally. This creates a strange emotional experience many successful people never expect. They finally achieve the thing they dreamed about, yet the emotional explosion they imagined never fully happens. The reward feels quieter than expected because the journey already forced them to become stronger, calmer, wiser, or emotionally detached along the way. The creepiest part is that many goals are not actually changing your life as much as they are changing you into someone who no longer needs the goal for the same emotional reasons you once did. If you need everyone to understand your path, you are not ready for a unique life. One of the hardest psychological realities about pursuing an uncommon life is accepting that most people will never fully understand your decisions while you are making them. Human beings naturally seek social approval because belonging feels emotionally safe. When others agree with your choices, the mind feels reassured. But the moment you choose a path outside normal expectations, misunderstanding becomes almost unavoidable. The unsettling part is that people often judge based on what feels familiar to them, not what is truly possible for you. If your goals, routines, sacrifices, or ambitions look different from the life they understand, many will quietly question your decisions. Some may think you are unrealistic. Others may see your focus as obsession, your discipline as isolation, or your ambition as arrogance. Their reactions are not always malicious. Most people simply interpret life through the limits of their own experiences. This creates a painful emotional conflict. The person chasing something meaningful often wants support and understanding from others while simultaneously choosing a path that few people around them can emotionally relate to. Over time, constantly needing validation becomes exhausting because unique goals rarely make complete sense in the beginning. Most extraordinary outcomes look strange, risky, or irrational before they finally produce visible results. The creepiest part is that needing everyone's understanding can secretly trap someone inside an ordinary life. Fear of judgment makes people shrink their dreams into socially acceptable versions that feel safer to explain. They begin making choices based on approval instead of alignment. As growth continues, emotionally strong people slowly become comfortable walking through periods of misunderstanding without constantly defending themselves. They realize that people often understand success only after results appear publicly. Before that moment, belief usually has to survive in private, unsupported, and sometimes completely alone inside your own mind. Comfort is expensive. It charges you in wasted years. One of the most deceptive things about comfort is that it rarely feels dangerous while it is slowly stealing time from your life. Comfort feels safe, relaxing, and emotionally rewarding in the moment. It protects people from stress, uncertainty, rejection, and failure. But underneath that temporary relief is a hidden cost that many people notice too late. Comfort quietly delays growth while making wasted time feel harmless. The human brain is naturally designed to avoid discomfort because discomfort often signals risk or effort. This is why staying inside familiar routines feels emotionally easier than pursuing difficult goals. The mind constantly searches for immediate relief, more sleep, more entertainment, less pressure, fewer responsibilities, endless distractions. At first, these choices seem small and harmless, but repeated comfort slowly becomes psychological dependency. The disturbing part is that comfort rarely destroys ambition all at once. It weakens it gradually. People begin postponing difficult conversations, delaying important risks, avoiding challenges, and choosing short-term peace over long-term growth. Over time, the life they once imagined starts feeling emotionally distant because comfort trained them to prioritize feeling safe instead of becoming stronger. What makes this even creepier is how quickly years disappear inside comfortable routines. Days blend together. Progress slows quietly. People convince themselves they still have time while repeating the same habits over and over. Then suddenly, they look back emotionally shocked at how much life passed while they remained mentally stuck in the same place. Meanwhile, discomfort often creates the very growth people are trying to avoid. Confidence is built through difficulty. Discipline is built through resistance. Strength is built through pressure. The frightening truth is that comfort is never truly free. Every unnecessary delay, avoided risk, and repeated excuse silently charges a price, and that price is usually paid with time that can never be recovered once it disappears. Many people want the outcome, but hate the process that creates it. One of the harshest truths about success is that people are usually in love with results, not the reality required to produce them. They want confidence without discomfort. They want money without sacrifice. They want discipline without repetition. They want respect without struggle. The outcome feels emotionally attractive because the mind focuses on the reward while quietly ignoring the painful process hidden underneath it. The disturbing part is that the process often feels completely different from the fantasy people imagined. Success looks glamorous from a distance, but up close it usually feels repetitive, stressful, lonely, uncertain, and emotionally exhausting. Waking up early stops feeling exciting after a few weeks. Practicing daily becomes mentally draining. Consistency becomes boring. Sacrifices begin feeling heavy. Slowly, many people realize they like the image of success more than the lifestyle required to create it. This creates a psychological conflict most people never expect. They genuinely desire a better future, but emotionally resist the daily behaviors that lead toward it. The brain naturally seeks comfort, stimulation, and quick reward, while real progress usually demands delayed gratification and long-term repetition. Over time, this tension causes many people to quit while still convincing themselves they truly wanted success. What makes this even more unsettling is that people often envy outcomes while silently rejecting the habits responsible for them. They admire someone's body, but avoid discipline. They admire someone's business, but avoid risk. They admire someone's confidence, but avoid discomfort. The reward becomes desirable, while the process becomes intolerable. The creepiest part is realizing that the process itself slowly transforms identity. A person does not simply achieve success. They become someone capable of sustaining it through repeated struggle. Many people never reach the outcome they dream about because they spend their lives emotionally negotiating against the very process designed to build it. Your mind will create clever reasons to avoid uncomfortable action. One of the creepiest things about the human mind is that it rarely protects you through obvious fear alone. Instead, it creates intelligent-sounding excuses that make avoidance feel logical, responsible, and even wise. Most people imagine self-sabotage looks dramatic, but in reality, it often sounds calm, reasonable, and convincing inside your own head. That is what makes it dangerous. The brain is naturally designed to avoid discomfort because discomfort signals uncertainty, risk, embarrassment, rejection, and possible failure. Whenever an action threatens your emotional comfort, the mind immediately begins searching for ways to delay it without making you feel weak. Instead of saying, "I am afraid," it says things like, "You need more preparation," "The timing is not perfect," or "You should wait until you feel more confident." These thoughts sound thoughtful enough to trust, which is why people obey them for years. What makes this psychologically disturbing is how creative the mind becomes when protecting comfort. It can turn procrastination into planning. It can disguise fear as perfectionism. It can transform insecurity into being realistic. Some people spend years researching, organizing, thinking, and preparing without realizing their mind is quietly helping them avoid the emotional discomfort of actually taking action. The unsettling part is that avoidance usually provides temporary relief, which reinforces the behavior emotionally. Every time someone escapes discomfort, the brain learns that avoidance successfully removed stress. Over time, this pattern becomes automatic and invisible. The creepiest part is that many people genuinely believe they are making rational decisions while their entire life is secretly being controlled by fear, wearing the mask of intelligence. Their mind becomes so skilled at protecting comfort that they slowly stop recognizing the difference between caution and quiet self-destruction. Success is not fair. It favors preparation, timing, courage, and persistence. One of the most emotionally difficult truths to accept is that success does not operate according to fairness. Many people grow up believing hard work alone guarantees rewards, but reality is far more unpredictable and psychologically uncomfortable than that. Two people can work equally hard and still experience completely different outcomes because success is influenced by timing, opportunity, courage, emotional resilience, preparation, and the ability to keep moving when life becomes unfair. The unsettling part is that life often rewards people who were simply prepared when an opportunity appeared, while others hesitated, doubted themselves, or waited for certainty. Someone else acted quickly despite fear. Courage creates movement, while overthinking creates delay. This is why less talented people sometimes outperform highly intelligent individuals. They were willing to act under uncertainty, while others stayed trapped in preparation. Timing also plays a disturbing role in success. Some people encounter the right opportunity during the perfect season of their life, while others face setbacks, bad environments, financial limitations, or emotional struggles that slow their progress for years. This reality feels unfair because effort alone does not fully control outcomes. At the same time, persistence quietly separates people more than talent does. Many individuals are capable of success temporarily, but few can emotionally survive repeated rejection, disappointment, criticism, and uncertainty long enough to finally break through. Most people stop not because success became impossible, but because the emotional weight became unbearable. The creepiest part is realizing that fairness is not the system controlling most outcomes. Reality often rewards adaptability, preparation, emotional endurance, and decisive action more than good intentions or equal effort. Once people truly understand this, they stop waiting for perfect conditions and begin strengthening themselves psychologically for an imperfect world that rarely distributes opportunities evenly. You can be talented and still be replaceable if you lack reliability. One of the harshest truths about success is that talent alone does not make people valuable for long. In the beginning, talent attracts attention because skill is impressive, exciting, and rare. But over time, reliability becomes far more important than raw ability. A person who consistently shows up, handles pressure calmly, keeps promises, and delivers results repeatedly often becomes more trusted than someone naturally gifted but emotionally inconsistent. The disturbing part is that talented people sometimes become overconfident because praise arrives easily early in life. They begin believing their ability alone will always protect them, but high-level environments quickly expose a frightening reality. People do not only need skill from you, they need stability, they need predictability, they need to know you can perform even when tired, stressed, emotional, bored, or under pressure. Unreliable behavior quietly destroys trust in ways many people never notice immediately. Showing up late repeatedly, disappearing when things become difficult, making emotional decisions, failing to communicate properly, or delivering inconsistent effort slowly changes how others perceive you. Even if someone is highly talented, people eventually stop depending on them because unpredictability creates risk. What makes this even creepier is that reliability often looks less impressive than talent in the short term. Consistency appears ordinary compared to flashy intelligence or natural ability. But over time, reliable people quietly become indispensable because they remove uncertainty. Others feel psychologically safe depending on them. Meanwhile, Unreliable talent creates emotional exhaustion for everyone around it. People never know which version of that person will appear. One day they perform brilliantly. Another day they disappear mentally, emotionally, or physically. The frightening truth is that many highly talented individuals slowly become replaceable, not because they lacked skill, but because people eventually trust dependable consistency more than unstable brilliance that cannot be counted on when it matters most. The market does not reward effort, it rewards value. One of the most emotionally difficult truths to accept is that the world does not automatically reward people simply because they worked hard. Effort feels deeply personal. Long hours, sacrifice, stress, exhaustion, and struggle create the belief that success should naturally follow. But the market, whether in business, careers, content creation, or life, responds primarily to value, not suffering. A person can work extremely hard on something nobody needs and still receive little reward. This reality feels unfair because humans instinctively want effort and outcome to be directly connected. People want the world to notice how much they sacrificed, but value is determined externally, not emotionally. The market cares about usefulness, impact, results, attention, problem solving, and demand. It asks one brutal question: does this improve something for other people enough for them to care? What makes this truth so unsettling is that many people quietly attach their identity to effort itself. They believe being busy means they are progressing. They believe exhaustion guarantees success. But someone working fewer hours on high-value skills or solutions can outperform years of intense labor directed toward the wrong things. The disturbing part is that this creates invisible frustration. A person may feel betrayed after years of hard work because they assumed sacrifice alone would create reward. Meanwhile, the market continues rewarding people who understand attention, communication, usefulness, timing, and leverage better than they do. The creepiest part is realizing that effort can sometimes become emotional comfort. Working hard feels noble even when the work itself is ineffective. People may cling to exhausting routines because effort protects them from confronting a painful possibility. They do not need to suffer more. They may simply need to become more valuable in ways the world actually responds to. Every ignored weakness eventually becomes a public problem. One of the harshest realities about personal growth is that weaknesses rarely stay hidden forever. What people ignore privately often reveals itself publicly over time. Small emotional flaws, bad habits, insecurities, addictions, anger issues, lack of discipline, poor communication, or weak self-control may seem manageable in the beginning because their consequences are still small, but ignored weaknesses do not disappear. They grow silently underneath daily life until pressure eventually exposes them. The disturbing part is that weaknesses usually reveal themselves when the stakes become highest. A person may appear confident for years until stress exposes emotional instability. Someone may seem disciplined until success increases temptation. Others may look intelligent until pressure reveals their inability to control ego, fear, or impulsive behavior. Weaknesses become dangerous because life eventually places people in situations where hiding is no longer possible. Human beings naturally avoid confronting flaws that threaten their self-image. The mind protects identity by minimizing problems, making excuses, or pretending certain habits are harmless. This creates a psychological trap where people delay self-correction simply because the consequences have not fully arrived yet. But time quietly magnifies everything left unresolved. What makes this especially unsettling is that ignored weaknesses often become visible to others before the person recognizes them themselves. Friends notice emotional instability, coworkers notice inconsistency, Relationships begin feeling the effects of unresolved behavior long before the individual fully accepts the problem internally. The creepiest part is that success can amplify weaknesses instead of hiding them. More money magnifies bad spending habits. More power magnifies ego. More freedom magnifies lack of discipline. Eventually, the flaw someone avoided privately becomes impossible to control publicly, and the life they built starts getting damaged by the very weakness they convinced themselves they had time to fix later. You cannot keep blaming distractions, you keep choosing. One of the harshest truths about self-sabotage is that many distractions are not accidents. They are choices repeated so often that they begin feeling automatic. People often speak about distractions as if they are external forces attacking their focus, but in reality, many distractions are emotionally selected because they provide temporary comfort, stimulation, escape, or relief from difficult responsibilities. The human brain naturally moves toward what feels easy and immediately rewarding. Social media, endless entertainment, meaningless scrolling, gossip, emotional drama, and constant stimulation all provide quick bursts of dopamine that temporarily silence stress, boredom, fear, or uncertainty. The disturbing part is that the mind starts preferring short-term relief over long-term progress without fully realizing it. Over time, people begin creating stories to protect themselves from guilt. They blame lack of time, bad luck, overwhelming schedules, or external distractions while continuing to choose behaviors that quietly destroy focus every day. This psychological conflict becomes dangerous because repeated distraction slowly weakens self-trust. Every ignored responsibility teaches the brain that comfort matters more than commitment. The unsettling part is that distractions rarely look destructive in the moment. They appear harmless because the consequences arrive slowly. One wasted hour feels insignificant. One day of procrastination feels recoverable. But repeated daily, those small decisions silently reshape identity, discipline, confidence, and future outcomes. Months and years disappear through tiny moments of avoidance that felt emotionally justified at the time. The creepiest part is that many distractions are secretly emotional coping mechanisms. People distract themselves not because they are lazy, but because focus forces them to confront difficult truths about fear, insecurity, responsibility, or uncertainty. Staying distracted protects them temporarily from discomfort, while simultaneously keeping them trapped inside the very life they claim they want to escape. Your future is being built by what you repeat when nobody is watching. One of the creepiest realities about life is that the moments shaping your future are usually not the dramatic public moments people notice. They are the quiet private routines, repeated in isolation when there is no applause, no pressure, no validation, and nobody around to judge your choices. Human beings often believe major outcomes come from big decisions, but most futures are quietly constructed through repeated unseen behavior. What makes this psychologically unsettling is that private habits reveal the version of you that exists without performance. When nobody is watching, people stop acting for appearance and start acting according to conditioning. The choices made in those invisible moments slowly shape confidence, discipline, emotional control, health, intelligence, and opportunity over time. The disturbing part is how harmless repeated behavior feels in the moment. One distraction seems small, one unnecessary delay feels temporary, one skipped effort appears insignificant, but repetition quietly rewires identity. The brain adapts to whatever behavior happens most often, whether helpful or destructive. Over time, actions repeated privately become automatic patterns that eventually appear publicly as personality, luck, or natural ability. This is why two people can dream about the same future while unconsciously building completely different realities behind closed doors. One person trains focus, discipline, learning, and consistency in silence. Another repeatedly strengthens distraction, avoidance, and comfort. Months later, their lives appear dramatically different, even though the daily choices once looked too small to matter. What makes this even creepier is that private behavior eventually exposes itself publicly, whether people intend it or not. Confidence reflects preparation, skill reflects repetition, emotional stability reflects mental habits practiced over time. The frightening truth is that your future is not mainly shaped by what you occasionally do when motivation appears. It is being shaped every day by the repeated behaviors you practice privately when nobody else is there to reward, punish, or even notice you. Some doors close because your old behavior cannot enter your new level. One of the most unsettling realities about growth is that new opportunities often demand the death of old habits. People usually think success is only about gaining access to bigger rooms, better opportunities, or higher levels of life. But many doors stay closed not because someone lacks talent or potential, but because their current behavior is incompatible with the future they want to enter. At first, this feels deeply frustrating. A person may work hard, dream big, and desperately want change while still repeating behaviors that quietly sabotage progress. Poor emotional control, laziness, inconsistency, lack of discipline, weak boundaries, procrastination, insecurity, arrogance, or constant distraction may seem manageable at one level of life, but higher levels expose those weaknesses much faster. The disturbing part is that old behavior often feels emotionally comfortable because it became part of identity. A person becomes attached to routines, reactions, and coping mechanisms that once protected them, even when those same patterns are now limiting growth. The mind resists change because changing behavior feels like losing part of oneself. What makes this psychological conflict so painful is that opportunities do not always reject people loudly. Sometimes doors close quietly, relationships weaken, trust disappears, momentum slows, respect fades. A person may not even realize that their habits, not external circumstances, are blocking the next stage of their life. The creepiest part is that higher levels often require emotional traits people never developed while struggling. Greater success demands greater patience. Greater influence demands greater self-control. Greater freedom demands greater responsibility. The same mindset that helped someone survive one chapter may become the very thing preventing them from entering the next. Eventually, life forces a brutal choice: protect old behaviors that feel familiar, or become someone your future can actually trust with bigger opportunities. Success will test your ego more than your intelligence. One of the most disturbing truths about success is that reaching higher levels in life often becomes less about knowledge and more about self-control. Intelligence can help someone create opportunities, solve problems, and gain recognition. But ego quietly determines whether they can survive success without destroying themselves. Many people believe failure is the greatest danger, yet success has ruined countless individuals by feeding the parts of them they never learned to control. At first, praise feels harmless, recognition feels motivating, attention feels rewarding, but repeated validation slowly changes the way people see themselves. The mind begins attaching identity to status, admiration, and superiority. Over time, ego starts whispering dangerous thoughts that feel completely justified. A person begins believing they are always right, more important, untouchable, or somehow above criticism. What makes ego especially dangerous is that it hides itself behind confidence. Someone can appear ambitious, driven, and powerful while secretly becoming emotionally addicted to admiration and control. Criticism begins feeling insulting instead of useful. Advice becomes harder to accept. Humility slowly disappears because success convinces the brain that current results prove permanent superiority. The unsettling part is that ego often grows strongest precisely when people believe they are becoming wiser. The more successful someone becomes, the easier it is to surround themselves with people who constantly agree with them, praise them, or fear challenging them. This creates a psychological bubble where self-awareness slowly weakens while arrogance quietly strengthens underneath. The creepiest part is that ego rarely destroys people immediately. It happens slowly through small behavioral shifts: less patience, less listening, more impulsive decisions, more emotional reactions to criticism. Eventually, intelligence stops protecting the person because ego begins controlling how that intelligence is used. By the time the damage becomes visible publicly, the emotional corruption often started years earlier in complete silence. You may need to become boring for a season to become impressive for a lifetime. One of the strangest realities about long-term success is that the process often looks painfully unexciting while it is happening. Modern culture constantly glorifies entertainment, attention, social activity, and instant excitement, which makes disciplined living appear dull by comparison. But many people who eventually build impressive lives go through long periods where their daily routine feels repetitive, quiet, and almost invisible to everyone around them. The unsettling part is that growth usually requires temporary sacrifice of stimulation. While others chase constant entertainment, emotionally disciplined people often spend seasons focused on routines that do not look glamorous from the outside. They wake up early, repeat the same habits, save money carefully, avoid unnecessary distractions, study consistently, work privately, and spend large amounts of time alone improving skills nobody is praising yet. To outsiders, this lifestyle can appear boring. Friends may wonder why someone stopped going out constantly, replying as often, or participating in endless distractions. But what looks boring externally is often intense internal construction happening quietly beneath the surface. Discipline thrives in repetition, not constant excitement. The human brain naturally resists this process because it craves novelty and social validation. Repetitive routines can make people feel like nothing important is happening, even while their future is slowly being built. This is why many individuals abandon consistency too early. They mistake temporary boredom for lack of progress. The creepiest part is that impressive lives are often built during periods nobody found interesting. Years later, people admire the results without realizing how much quiet sacrifice created them. They see confidence, success, stability, or mastery, but never fully understand the lonely routines and emotionally repetitive seasons that made those things possible. Eventually, many realize that temporary excitement often creates long-term emptiness, while temporary boredom can quietly build a future strong enough to change the rest of their life completely. The version of you that wants comfort cannot lead the version of you that wants greatness. One of the darkest psychological conflicts inside human beings is that two different versions of the self are constantly fighting for control. One version wants safety, comfort, entertainment, validation, and emotional relief. The other wants growth, discipline, mastery, purpose, and greatness. The frightening part is that these two versions rarely want the same lifestyle, and eventually, one of them begins dominating the direction of your future. The comfort-driven version of the mind constantly searches for immediate peace. It avoids discomfort, delays difficult tasks, seeks distraction, and protects familiar routines. It wants sleep instead of discipline, excuses instead of accountability, and temporary relief instead of long-term transformation. In the moment, this version feels emotionally convincing because comfort always speaks the language of safety. But greatness requires something psychologically uncomfortable. It demands sacrifice before reward. It demands consistency without applause. It demands acting while uncertain, tired, or emotionally resistant. This is why the comfort-seeking version of yourself becomes dangerous when it remains in control. It quietly prioritizes short-term emotional satisfaction over long-term growth while convincing you that delay is harmless. What makes this even creepier is that comfort rarely feels destructive immediately. The consequences appear slowly. Days become months. Potential weakens quietly. Ambition fades through repeated compromise. Meanwhile, the mind creates logical explanations for every avoided challenge so that a person can continue feeling comfortable without confronting the truth. The disturbing reality is that greatness usually requires behaviors that the comfort-driven mind naturally resists. Waking up early, practicing consistently, risking failure, tolerating loneliness, controlling emotions, and maintaining discipline all feel emotionally unnatural at first. The frightening truth is that your future will ultimately be shaped by whichever version of yourself you repeatedly obey, the one seeking comfort now, or the one willing to suffer temporarily in order to become something far greater later. People respect results faster than explanations. One of the harshest truths about human nature is that most people do not fully believe in potential, intentions, or explanations for very long. Words may create temporary interest, but visible results change perception almost instantly. A person can spend years explaining their dreams, struggles, plans, and ambitions, yet remain overlooked until reality finally produces undeniable proof. The moment results appear, the same people who doubted them often begin speaking differently. This happens because humans naturally respond more strongly to evidence than promises. Explanations require patience, imagination, and trust. Results require none of those things. Success simplifies perception. Money, skill, transformation, confidence, discipline, influence, or achievement create visible proof that bypasses skepticism completely. What once sounded unrealistic suddenly appears obvious after the outcome exists. The unsettling part is that many people waste enormous emotional energy trying to convince others to believe in them too early. They explain why they are struggling, why progress is taking time, why their dream matters, or why they will eventually succeed. But explanations rarely create respect at the same speed as visible achievement. In fact, excessive explaining can sometimes reduce perceived confidence because it signals emotional dependence on external validation. What makes this reality emotionally painful is that support often arrives late. Some people only begin respecting your discipline after it produces success. They only admire your focus after it becomes profitable. They only value your vision after it starts working publicly. Until then, many quietly judge based on current evidence alone. The creepiest part is realizing how quickly perception changes once results appear. People who ignored you may suddenly seek your advice. Those who questioned your direction may act as though they believed in you all along. Human beings often measure truth through outcomes, which is why silent progress usually becomes more powerful than endless explanation over time. Your private standards become your public reputation. One of the creepiest truths about human behavior is that reputation is rarely built during public moments alone. It is built quietly through repeated private choices nobody else sees. The way a person behaves when there is no pressure, no audience, and no immediate consequence slowly shapes the kind of individual they eventually become in public. Over time, hidden habits stop staying hidden because repeated behavior always leaks into visible reality. Most people focus heavily on appearance because appearances create faster social rewards. They want to look disciplined, intelligent, trustworthy, or successful in front of others. But private standards determine whether those qualities are actually real or simply temporary performances. Someone who lies casually in small situations eventually damages trust in larger ones. Someone who constantly avoids responsibility privately eventually struggles with accountability publicly. What a person repeatedly tolerates in secret slowly becomes part of their identity. The disturbing part is that the brain normalizes repeated behavior very quickly. Small compromises stop feeling serious after enough repetition. Laziness becomes routine. Dishonesty becomes easier. Weak discipline starts feeling normal. People often believe they can separate private behavior from public image, but human psychology does not work that way. Habits quietly reshape personality from underneath. What makes this especially dangerous is that reputation changes slowly until it suddenly feels permanent. Others begin noticing patterns long before someone fully realizes what they are projecting outwardly. Trust weakens, respect decreases, reliability becomes questioned. Eventually, people are reacting not to isolated actions, but to the character those actions repeatedly revealed over time. The creepiest part is that many people think reputation is controlled by what they say about themselves, when in reality it is mostly controlled by what their private standards force them to repeatedly become. Public identity is often just private behavior, exposed slowly enough for people not to notice the transformation happening until it is already complete. If you cannot control your attention, someone else will profit from it. One of the creepiest realities of modern life is that human attention has become one of the most valuable resources in the world. Entire industries are built around capturing, controlling, and monetizing focus. Social media platforms, advertisements, entertainment algorithms, news feeds, and endless notifications are all competing for one thing: your attention. The disturbing part is that many people believe they are freely choosing what they consume, while their behavior is quietly being engineered by systems specifically designed to keep them distracted. The human brain is naturally vulnerable to stimulation. Novelty, controversy, emotional outrage, pleasure, and instant gratification trigger dopamine responses that make attention difficult to control. This is why people often pick up their phones without thinking, scroll longer than intended, or lose hours consuming content they never planned to watch. Their focus slowly becomes reactive instead of intentional. Over time, uncontrolled attention creates dangerous consequences. Goals become weaker because concentration disappears. Deep thinking becomes difficult because the brain adapts to constant stimulation. Emotional stability decreases because endless information overload keeps the mind in a state of restlessness and comparison. Meanwhile, companies, influencers, advertisers, and platforms continue profiting from every second of engagement. The unsettling part is that distracted people become easier to influence psychologically. Constant stimulation weakens self-awareness and increases impulsive behavior. People start consuming more than they create, reacting more than they think, and escaping discomfort instead of confronting it. Their attention no longer belongs fully to them. The creepiest part is that attention shapes identity itself. Whatever repeatedly captures your focus slowly influences your thoughts, emotions, desires, habits, and beliefs. If someone cannot consciously direct their own attention, other people eventually begin directing the direction of their mind for profit, influence, or control without them even realizing how deeply it is happening. The grind is not glamorous. It is repetitive, quiet, and often annoying. One of the biggest lies people believe about success is that the journey constantly feels exciting, meaningful, and emotionally rewarding. In reality, the grind is usually far less dramatic than people imagine. Most of the work that changes a person's life feels repetitive, unnoticed, mentally exhausting, and sometimes painfully boring. The human mind craves novelty and stimulation, but success is often built through routines that look almost identical day after day. This creates a dangerous psychological conflict because people expect growth to feel inspiring all the time. They imagine passion will permanently fuel discipline, but eventually, motivation fades, excitement disappears, and what remains is repetition, waking up early again, practicing again, editing again, learning again, failing again, solving the same problems again. The grind quietly tests whether someone truly wants the future they talk about or simply likes the emotional fantasy of success. The disturbing part is that repetitive work often feels emotionally meaningless while it is happening. Progress arrives slowly. Results remain invisible for long periods. Meanwhile, distractions offer instant pleasure and relief. This is why so many people abandon important goals. The mind naturally starts questioning whether the effort is worth continuing when daily work begins feeling monotonous and emotionally draining. What makes this even creepier is that outsiders usually see only the polished outcome. They see the success, confidence, money, or recognition, but never the thousands of frustrating, repetitive moments hidden underneath it. They never see the boredom, self-doubt, emotional exhaustion, or silent persistence required to keep moving when nothing feels exciting anymore. The frightening truth is that greatness is often built through ordinary routines repeated so many times that most people emotionally give up long before the results become visible enough to make the suffering feel justified. You do not rise to your dreams. You fall to your daily routine. One of the most uncomfortable truths about success is that dreams alone have very little power over daily behavior. People love imagining future versions of themselves, healthier, richer, more disciplined, more respected, more successful, but the human mind is ultimately shaped by repetition, not imagination. A person does not magically rise to the level of their ambition when pressure appears. They usually fall back on the habits and routines they practiced consistently in private. This reality becomes disturbing when you realize how much of life operates automatically. Daily routines quietly program identity over time. The way someone wakes up, spends free time, handles discomfort, manages attention, reacts to stress, and repeats habits each day slowly determines the direction of their future more than occasional bursts of motivation ever could. The unsettling part is that routines often feel insignificant while they are happening. One lazy morning feels harmless. One distracted evening seems unimportant. One day of procrastination feels easy to justify, but repeated behavior slowly becomes personality. Small actions repeated daily begin shaping confidence, discipline, emotional control, health, and even self-respect without a person fully noticing it. What makes this psychological reality so dangerous is that people often emotionally identify with their dreams while physically obeying routines that lead somewhere completely different. Someone may deeply desire success while living in habits designed for comfort, distraction, inconsistency, and avoidance. Over time, the conflict between fantasy and behavior creates frustration because the future they imagine never matches the routines they repeat. The creepiest part is realizing that your routine is quietly predicting your future long before visible results appear. A person's habits reveal where they are truly headed, even when their words describe an entirely different destination. Dreams inspire people temporarily, but routines decide who they eventually become. Most people are not behind because they lack ideas. They are behind because they lack execution. One of the most uncomfortable truths about success is that great ideas are far more common than people think. Almost everyone has dreams, plans, creative thoughts, business ideas, goals, or visions of a better future. The real difference between people who change their lives and people who stay stuck is rarely imagination. It is execution. The ability to act consistently despite fear, discomfort, boredom, uncertainty, and imperfection is what separates fantasy from reality. The human brain loves ideas because ideas create emotional excitement without requiring immediate risk. Thinking about success feels safe. Talking about plans feels productive. Imagining a better future gives temporary motivation and dopamine. But execution is different. Execution forces confrontation with reality. It exposes insecurity, lack of discipline, fear of judgment, and emotional inconsistency. This is why many people stay trapped in endless preparation while convincing themselves they are making progress. What makes this psychologically disturbing is how easy it is to mistake thinking for action. A person can spend years researching, planning, organizing, consuming information, and discussing goals without ever placing themselves in situations where real growth begins. The mind secretly prefers planning because planning protects the ego from failure. Action does not. The unsettling part is that execution often looks unimpressive in the beginning. It is repetitive, slow, imperfect, and emotionally uncomfortable. Most people abandon it because they expected motivation to carry them further than discipline actually can. The creepiest part is that many people already know exactly what they should be doing to improve their life. They are not trapped by lack of knowledge. They are trapped by hesitation, fear, distraction, emotional inconsistency, and the painful reality that execution requires becoming someone mentally stronger than the person who only enjoys imagining success from a distance.